Ava Johnson could feel the tension in the air the moment she stepped into the restaurant that evening. The usual hum of chatter and clinking of silverware was accompanied by a sense of anticipation. Something was different tonight. Maybe it was the crisp autumn air, or the way the restaurant's staff seemed a little more on edge than usual. Or maybe it was because the news had just hit. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson was coming to dine at Ella's Bistro, the trendy downtown spot where Ava had worked for the last 3 years. Her heart raced with both excitement and anxiety. Sure, she'd served celebrities before. Actors, athletes, politicians. But something about The Rock made this night feel like it was going to be different. Ava had always admired him, not just for his larger-than-life persona, but for the way he seemed to carry himself. He wasn't like other stars who acted as if the world owed them something. He seemed down-to-earth, humble, even approachable. Tonight, she wasn't just Ava the waitress. She was about to serve a man who had shaped so many people's lives through his films, his philanthropy, and his unmatched work ethic. She could already hear the whispers of her co-workers. "Ava, you have to make sure he's treated right. This is your big chance." The pressure was on, and she could feel it weighing on her shoulders. Ava wiped her hands on her apron, adjusting the collar of her uniform before heading to the kitchen. She grabbed a tray of drinks to deliver to the table by the window, where a group of women were sitting, gossiping excitedly. The table was close to the entrance, and from the corner of her eye, Ava saw a man in a black hoodie walk in. He was tall, with a broad frame, and something about him was strikingly familiar. It wasn't until he removed the hood that she realized who it was. Dwayne Johnson. The room seemed to freeze. A ripple of murmurs spread through the restaurant. The buzz was electric, and Ava's pulse quickened. She hadn't expected him to arrive so suddenly, nor did she expect the immediate whirlwind of attention that followed his entrance. He wasn't just a celebrity. He was The Rock, a global superstar whose presence could stop the world for a moment. Ava quickly composed herself, setting down the drinks and adjusting her apron before heading over to greet him. She had to act professional. She couldn't let her nerves get the best of her. "Good evening, Mr. Johnson," she said, flashing him a polite smile. "Welcome to Ella's Bistro. Can I get you started with something to drink?" The Rock looked up, his warm brown eyes meeting hers. "Hey, how's it going?" His voice was deep and friendly, the kind of tone that made you feel like you were old friends, even if you just met. "I'm doing great, thanks. Can I offer you some water, or maybe a cocktail?" Ava asked, trying to keep her composure, though her heart was beating so loudly she was sure he could hear it. "I'll take some water for now," he said, his smile easygoing. "I'm in the mood to keep it low-key tonight." Ava nodded, then went to fetch his water, feeling a mix of pride and disbelief. She had spent so many years working in the food industry, but this felt different. This was a moment that would be remembered, not just by her, but by everyone who worked here. As she returned to the table with his water, she noticed a commotion in the corner of the room. A group of fans had spotted The Rock, and they weren't shy about approaching him. One woman, in particular, pushed past a few tables, her eyes locked on Dwayne, ignoring the other patrons. Her movements were erratic, too excited, too much in a rush. Ava's heart sank when she saw the woman making a beeline for Dwayne. She was getting too close, too fast, and she wasn't paying attention to the people around her. Before Ava could take another step, the woman lunged toward The Rock, nearly knocking over a glass of water on the table. "Oh my God, I love you," she shouted, her hands reaching out toward him. Dwayne flinched, his body tensing, clearly startled. Ava's instincts kicked in. Without thinking, she rushed toward the table, putting herself between Dwayne and the woman. She grabbed the fan's wrist, gently pulling her away from the table. "Excuse me, ma'am," Ava said firmly, but with a calm authority. "Please, let Mr. Johnson enjoy his meal. We have to respect his space." The woman seemed caught off guard but didn't back down. She jerked her arm away. "I'm just trying to get an autograph, okay?" she snapped, her voice growing louder. Ava held her ground. "I understand, but you can't just rush him like that. Please, take a step back." For a brief moment, it felt like the entire room had paused. Ava's heart raced in her chest, but she was focused. The woman stared her down, her face flushed with frustration. She opened her mouth to say something else, but before she could, Ava felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find her manager, Brad, standing behind her, his face stern. "Ava," he said in a low voice, "what the hell are you doing?" Ava's eyes widened. "I was just helping. You're making a scene." Brad cut her off, his voice rising. "This isn't how we do things here." But she was getting too close to him. Ava tried to explain, her voice shaking. "I was just protecting him." Brad's eyes narrowed. "You've gone too far. You're out of line, Ava. You've put us all in a difficult position." Before Ava could respond, she heard Dwayne Johnson's calm voice from behind her. "It's all good. She was just doing her job, man." Brad hesitated, clearly embarrassed, but didn't back down. "I'm sorry, but you're going to have to leave, Ava. We don't tolerate this kind of behavior here." Ava's stomach dropped. It felt like the world was spinning. She had done the right thing, hadn't she? But her manager's words felt like a punch to the gut. "Wait, what?" Ava stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Brad crossed his arms. "You're fired." The words hit her like a freight train. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. This wasn't happening. Not after everything. Not after trying to protect someone who had been a hero to her. The Rock stood up, his expression softening. "Hey, look. I'm sorry this happened. It wasn't her fault. But the damage was done." Ava stood frozen as the restaurant around her continued to buzz, but everything felt distant. Her dream of a better life, her job, her dignity. It all seemed to crumble in an instant. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Ava Johnson stood frozen, her mind reeling in disbelief. Fired. Just like that. After everything she had endured. Working long shifts, dealing with difficult customers, and pushing through her own personal struggles. This felt like a slap in the face. The sudden shift from the excitement of meeting Dwayne Johnson to the crushing blow of losing her job was almost too much to comprehend. Her fingers tightened around the edges of the tray she had been holding moments before, now abandoned on the table in front of her. The noise of the restaurant, the clinking of silverware, the murmur of conversation, the faint laughter, felt distant. Her body felt numb, and for a few seconds, she couldn't move. It was like the room was spinning, and the only thing she could focus on was the sting of betrayal. She heard Brad's footsteps fade into the background as he walked off to attend to another matter. Dwayne Johnson's presence was still there, but it no longer mattered. Ava turned and walked toward the back of the restaurant, her legs unsteady beneath her. The kitchen doors swung open as she entered, and the loud hum of the refrigerator and sizzling pans seemed deafening in the quiet that had enveloped her. Ava dropped her apron onto the counter with a clatter. She was trying to hold back the tears, but they came anyway. Her emotions were a tangled mess, an overwhelming mix of anger, hurt, and disbelief. How could this have happened? She had done everything right. She had protected a guest, stood up for what was decent, and yet, she was the one being punished. "Hey, Ava, you all right?" Jasmine's voice broke through her thoughts, and Ava turned to see her best friend standing at the kitchen door. Jasmine had been working at Ella's Bistro almost as long as Ava, and they had shared countless late-night shifts, bonding over their shared struggles. Jasmine's expression was one of concern as she walked toward Ava, her arms folded over her chest. "What the hell happened out there? You were doing your job. Don't let them make you think otherwise." Ava wiped her eyes quickly, trying to regain some composure. "It doesn't matter now. I'm fired. Brad, he just told me to leave." Just like that. Jasmine's eyes widened. "No. No way. He can't do that. You were just protecting someone. What kind of place is this?" Ava shook her head, feeling the weight of the injustice settle in her chest. "Doesn't matter. He said I was out of line." Jasmine stepped closer, her voice low and serious. "Ava, you've worked your ass off here. You've done everything they've asked. They don't get to treat you like this. You've got to fight it. We can take this to court or something. Get your job back." Ava exhaled sharply, wiping the last of her tears away. "I don't even know where to start. I don't have time for a legal battle, Jazz. I don't think I want to keep working here anyway. Not after this. It's just, all of it's too much. The words hit her harder than she expected. She had been holding on to this job for so long, desperate to make ends meet, to pay bills, to survive. And now, in one moment, it was all gone. But there was a strange sense of freedom in saying it out loud, in admitting that maybe it wasn't worth the fight anymore. I don't know what's next, Ava continued, her voice barely a whisper. But I'm tired, Jazz. I've been tired for a while. Jasmine didn't respond right away. Instead, she just nodded and gave Ava a tight hug. The comfort of her friend's embrace was like a lifeline, something Ava desperately needed right now. But there was still a lingering sense of uncertainty, a gnawing feeling in the pit of her stomach. I know you're tired, Jasmine said, pulling back and looking Ava in the eye. But you're stronger than this. You've always been stronger than this. Whatever happens, I'm here for you, okay? You don't have to do this alone. Ava gave a faint nod. I don't know what's next, but I need to figure it out. I don't know where to even start. As she spoke, a thought crossed her mind. Maybe this is the universe telling me it's time for a change. For as long as Ava could remember, she had dreamed of more. She had always wanted something bigger, something that was her own. A business. A future where she could stand on her own 2 feet and create a life where she didn't have to depend on someone else to determine her worth. But it wasn't as easy as just wanting it. Her background had never been one of privilege or opportunity. Ava was from the south side of Chicago, a place where hope was often a rare commodity. Her mom had raised her and her 2 younger brothers on her own, working long hours at a factory. They didn't have much, but they had each other. Still, the lack of resources and support had made everything harder. Ava had always felt like she was on the outside looking in, watching others live lives she could only dream of. But that didn't stop her. She had been determined to build a better future for herself. That's why she had worked so hard at Ella's Bistro, hoping to one day save up enough to pursue her dreams. But now, everything felt uncertain. What was she supposed to do without a steady income? How could she make her dreams a reality when she had just been tossed aside without a second thought? Jasmine must have sensed Ava's internal struggle, because she didn't push her any further. Instead, she simply sat down next to Ava, offering her a silent comfort. After a long pause, Ava spoke again, her voice tinged with a newfound resolve. Maybe it's time to make a change. I can't keep going like this, working for people who don't respect me. I've got to start doing things for myself, for my future. Jasmine smiled softly. That's the spirit. You've got this. You're stronger than you think. Ava didn't feel strong, not yet, but deep down, she knew this was the beginning of something new. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was hers to walk. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she was ready to take that first step. The night after Ava was fired, she barely slept. She lay in her small, cluttered apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of that evening over and over again in her mind. Each time, the sting of Brad's words, the dismissal, felt like a fresh wound, reopening a part of her she tried to protect for so long. She had been trying to hold on to her job, her routine. For years, Ava had worked tirelessly at Ella's Bistro, doing everything she could to make ends meet, save money, and chase after a dream that always felt just out of reach. That was how life had always been for her, fighting for a sliver of hope in a world that never made it easy. And now, with one unexpected moment, it all felt like it had come crashing down. She had made one bold move to protect someone, and it had cost her everything. Ava had always considered herself strong. She had faced hardships her whole life, from growing up on the rough streets of Southside Chicago to navigating the difficult world of low-wage service jobs. But tonight, she didn't feel strong. She felt defeated. What now? The question echoed in her mind as she sat up in bed, running a hand through her messy hair. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, pulling her from her thoughts. She picked it up without looking at the screen inside. It was Jasmine. Hey, you good? Ava stared at the text for a moment before typing back. Not really. Trying to figure out what to do next. You'll figure it out. I know you will. Just don't give up. Ava smiled weakly at the message. She knew Jasmine was trying to be supportive, But it wasn't as simple as that. Ava had tried and tried for years to make something out of nothing, and each time, the cards had been stacked against her. She couldn't help but wonder if there was more to life than this constant struggle. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a notification from her bank. She groaned, knowing it was just a reminder of the bills she still hadn't paid. The rent, utilities, car payment, everything seemed to be piling up at once. The reality of her financial situation hit her like a ton of bricks. She had no job, no backup plan, and she wasn't exactly in a position to take any time off to figure things out. Suddenly, the phone vibrated again, but this time it was different. It was a message from an unfamiliar number. Ava furrowed her brow and opened it. "Hey, this is Dwayne. You don't know me, but I saw what happened last night. I just wanted to reach out and let you know that you did the right thing. That woman was out of line, and you were just doing your job. You shouldn't have lost your job over it. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to let me know." Ava stared at the message in shock, her heart pounding in her chest. Dwayne Johnson? He was reaching out to her? She blinked several times, unsure if her eyes were playing tricks on her. Was this a joke? She quickly typed a response. I don't know what to say. Thank you, but I really didn't expect this. I'm just trying to figure things out right now." It felt surreal. Just the night before, she had been standing face to face with him, The Rock, and now he was texting her, offering support. But it wasn't just about him being a celebrity. It was about him recognizing her humanity, her worth in a situation where she had felt completely discarded. That meant something. Before she could think too much about it, her phone rang. It was a call from Jasmine. Ava hesitated for a moment before picking up. "Jazz," Ava said, her voice still shaky. "You won't believe who just texted me." "I can't imagine," Jasmine replied, laughing lightly. "Who?" "Dwayne Johnson." There was a pause, followed by a burst of laughter from Jasmine. "No way. What did he say?" Ava recounted the message, still processing what was happening. When she finished, Jasmine was silent for a moment before responding. "Ava, this is huge. He's not just some celebrity who brushes people off. He's someone who genuinely cares. This could be your chance, you know?" Ava nodded, even though Jasmine couldn't see her. She had to admit, Jasmine was right. This could be an opportunity, something to help her get back on her feet. But Ava couldn't ignore the larger question hanging over her. What was she supposed to do now? "I don't know, Jazz. I'm just lost right now. I've been trying for so long to find a way out, but it feels like I keep hitting dead ends." "You have to start somewhere," Jasmine said gently. "Maybe this is your start. Take it slow. Get in touch with Dwayne if you feel like it, but don't let your pride hold you back. You're not in this alone. You have options. You just have to open your eyes to them." Ava sat on her bed, staring at her phone, the message from Dwayne still on the screen. For the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was her opportunity to finally turn things around. "All right, I'm gonna think about it," Ava said after a long pause. "But you're right. I can't let fear stop me from taking the next step." "That's the spirit," Jasmine replied, her voice full of encouragement. "Whatever happens, I've got your back." As Ava hung up the phone, she sat back on the bed, staring at the ceiling again. The weight of the situation hadn't disappeared, but there was a new sense of possibility in the air. Maybe it wasn't all over. Maybe this was just the beginning of something new. For the first time in a long time, Ava felt a spark of determination. This wasn't the end of her story. In fact, it might just be the start of something even bigger than she had imagined. Ava woke up early the next morning, the remnants of her restless night still clouding her thoughts. It was hard to shake the feeling of uncertainty that had been gnawing at her all night. What was she supposed to do now? She had never been in a situation like this before. Fired from her job for doing the right thing, yet oddly offered support by the most unlikely of people. The message from Dwayne Johnson was still on her phone, and every time Ava thought about it, a sense of disbelief washed over her. She had heard stories about celebrities being kind and down to earth, but this was a personal message. From the Dwayne Johnson, the one who had reached out to her after a moment of adversity, the one who had recognized her worth when no one else had. Ava had spent so many years trying to survive, to keep her head above water, that the idea of someone, especially someone like Dwayne, taking the time to acknowledge her, to offer her support, felt almost too good to be true. But she had to admit, deep down, that this could be the break she needed. A part of her felt like the universe was finally offering her a chance, a way out of the dead end she had been stuck in for so long. She just had to take it. Sitting at her small kitchen table, sipping on a cup of coffee, Ava looked at her phone again. She had been sitting on Dwayne's message for hours, unsure of what to say. How could she even begin to express her gratitude, let alone ask for help? It felt like the first step was the hardest. But the more Ava thought about it, the more she realized this wasn't just about asking for help. This was about seizing an opportunity. It was about taking control of her life and not letting it slip away. She had spent far too much time living in the shadows, working herself to the bone, trying to make something out of nothing. Now, she had a chance to do something bigger, to stop surviving and start living. Ava took a deep breath, gathered her thoughts, and opened the message from Dwayne again. She felt a wave of nerves, but her fingers started typing anyway. "Hi Dwayne, thank you so much for reaching out. It means more to me than I can say. I've been going through a lot lately, and honestly, your message was the first thing to make me feel like I might not be completely lost. I've always wanted more for myself, something bigger, but I've been too afraid to make the leap. I guess I'm just not sure where to start." Ava paused, reading the message over a few times before hitting send. Her heart raced as she placed the phone down on the table. She had done it. She had taken the first step. Now, all she had to do was wait. Minutes passed like hours. Ava tried to distract herself, but her mind kept drifting back to the phone on the table. She wondered if Dwayne would even reply. After all, he was a busy man with more important things to do than deal with someone like her. But still, a part of her couldn't shake the hope that he would. And then, finally, the phone buzzed again. It was a message from Dwayne. "Ava, I'm glad to hear from you. First off, let me just say that you're not alone in this. I know how it feels to be stuck in a place where it feels like the world is against you, but that doesn't have to be your reality. You have the strength to do what you want. If you're serious about making a change, I'd love to help. Let's figure out what your next step is together. I've been through some tough times myself, and I believe in giving back to those who are willing to fight for their future." Ava's breath caught in her throat. His words were so genuine, so full of encouragement. She couldn't believe it. He was offering to help her. Dwayne Johnson, the man she had seen on the big screen, was offering his support in her personal journey. It was more than she could have ever hoped for. For the first time in years, Ava felt a weight lift off her shoulders. This wasn't just a random act of kindness. This was the beginning of something real. It wasn't going to be easy, she knew that. But with Dwayne's help, maybe she could finally create the life she had always dreamed of. "Thank you," Ava quickly typed back. "I don't know what to say, but I'm ready to take that leap. I've always wanted to do something for myself, but I've been afraid. I just don't know where to start." Ava sat back in her chair and waited. It felt surreal to be having this conversation. Just days ago, she was still working at Ella's Bistro, struggling to get by, feeling invisible and unimportant. Now, she had an ally, someone who understood the struggle and was offering her a lifeline. The phone buzzed again. "It's all about the first step. We'll figure it out together, but you have to take that first step and trust the process. What's one thing you've always wanted to do but never had the courage to try?" "Let's start there." Ava's heart beat faster. What was the one thing she had always wanted to do? She had dreamed of owning her own business for as long as she could remember. A small cafe or a bakery, maybe. A place where people could come together over good food, share stories, and escape their own troubles, just like she had always dreamed. But she had never thought it was possible. She had never thought she was capable of making that dream come true. But now, with Dwayne's support, maybe she could. Ava smiled to herself, a spark of excitement igniting within her. She had nothing to lose. She had already lost her job, her sense of security, and her comfort zone. It was time to start something new. "I've always wanted to open my own cafe. I've dreamed of it for years, but I've never had the courage or the resources to make it happen." The phone buzzed one last time. "That's a great start, Ava. Let's make it happen. We'll take this one step at a time, but the most important thing is that you're not alone in this. We're in this together. Ava's hands trembled as she read the message. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she had a chance, like she could actually make her dreams come true. She had the support she needed, and she wasn't going to let this opportunity slip away. She was ready to take the leap. The next few days felt like a blur for Ava. She had always been someone who worked on autopilot, getting by, putting in the hours, and barely taking a breath in between. But now, she was waking up every day with purpose. She had Dwayne Johnson in her corner, and for the first time in years, she had the feeling that the world wasn't just passing her by. She was starting to take control. Ava spent her days researching cafes. What worked? What didn't? What made a place special? She combed through articles, watched YouTube videos, and even started looking at spaces online. It was exciting, but it was also overwhelming. Every time she thought she had a solid plan, another obstacle appeared. She wasn't sure what was scarier, the idea of failing or the thought of finally succeeding. Her phone buzzed again, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from Dwayne. "Hey Ava, how's it going? Any thoughts on your next steps? I know it's a lot to process, but I'm here if you need to talk things through." Ava smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over her. Dwayne was serious about helping her, and that meant everything. He wasn't just offering words of encouragement, he was offering real support. She quickly replied, "Hey, thanks for checking in. I've been doing a lot of research, but honestly, I'm still not sure where to start. It feels like there are 1,000 things I need to do all at once." Almost immediately, she received a response. "I get it. It's easy to get overwhelmed, but it all starts with one step. Let's focus on the basics. You need a solid business plan. That's going to be your roadmap. If you can't see the path clearly, how will anyone else?" Ava sat back in her chair, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. A business plan. She had heard the term 1,000 times, but the idea of putting her thoughts down on paper seemed daunting. Where did she even begin? But Dwayne's words stuck with her. A roadmap. It felt like the one thing she was missing. If she could figure out the business plan, then everything else might fall into place. "Okay," Ava typed back. "I'll start on it. Thanks for the push." After sending the message, she turned her attention to the idea of a business plan. She had no formal business training, but she was smart. She had learned a lot over the years, working at Ella's Bistro and paying attention to the inner workings of the restaurant world. She knew that running a cafe wouldn't be easy, but she also knew that she had a passion for it. The idea of serving people, creating a space for them to feel welcome, and sharing her love for food. It was something she couldn't ignore any longer. She decided to start with the basics, what her cafe would be about, who it would serve, and how it would stand out. After all, she had to have a unique selling point. What made her cafe different from the others in the city? Ava pulled out a notebook and began to write. What's the vibe? She wanted it to be warm, cozy, and welcoming. A place where people could sit for hours, sipping coffee and reading, or grab a quick bite on their lunch break. She imagined a mural on one of the walls, local artwork hanging, and soft jazz music playing in the background. Who was the target customer? Ava thought about the neighborhood she wanted to open in, somewhere with a blend of young professionals and families. A community that valued quality, comfort, and a little bit of charm. What sets it apart? Ava didn't want to just serve coffee and pastries. She wanted her cafe to be a destination. She thought about the food she loved to cook. Fresh, hearty, and with a bit of a twist. Maybe a few signature dishes, unique sandwiches, and a coffee menu that would rival the best places in town. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Ava felt a rush of pride as she looked at what she had written. She could do this. She just needed to keep going. Over the next few days, Ava worked tirelessly on her business plan. She spent hours in local libraries, reading up on small business management and finances. She knew that opening a cafe wouldn't be cheap, and the reality of how much money she would need hit her like a ton of bricks. But she refused to let that stop her. She was resourceful. She'd find a way. She reached out to a few local banks and community organizations for small business loans, but the process was intimidating. Ava felt out of her depth, but each time she started to doubt herself, she remembered the message Dwayne had sent her. You have the strength to do what you want. She couldn't let fear hold her back anymore. By the end of the week, Ava had a rough draft of her business plan. It wasn't perfect, but it was a step forward. She reached out to Dwayne for advice on the next steps. Hey Dwayne, I've been working on the business plan. I think I've got a rough draft. It's still a little rough, but I'd love your thoughts on it when you have a moment. Ava hit send and immediately felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Was she really doing this? Was she really going to put herself out there and take this leap of faith? Her phone buzzed again, and Dwayne's reply came through. I'm proud of you, Ava. I can't wait to see it. Let's make sure we break it down into manageable pieces. The financials can be tricky, but once you get that sorted, you'll have a solid foundation. Ava smiled to herself. It felt like every day she was getting closer to her goal. The road ahead was still long, and she knew there would be challenges along the way, but for the first time in a while, she wasn't afraid. She had a plan. She had a mentor. And most importantly, she had hope. Ava closed her laptop and stood up, stretching. It was a small step, but it was a step nonetheless. One step closer to making her dream a reality. The financials were always the hardest part. Ava sat at her kitchen table, her laptop open in front of her, and her mind swirling with numbers. She had a rough draft of her business plan. She had the vision for her cafe, the community she wanted to serve, and the unique vibe that would set her cafe apart. But now, she had to figure out the hard part, how to pay for it. She had looked into small business loans, but the process was complicated, and the numbers felt intimidating. Ava didn't have a large savings account or a rich family member to turn to for help. She was starting from scratch, with only the promise of a dream that kept her awake at night. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Dwayne. Hey Ava, how's the plan coming along? Have you thought about funding yet? I know it can be a tough hurdle, but there are options out there. Let me know if you want to talk it through. Ava read the message and felt a pang of both gratitude and fear. She had been putting off dealing with the financial side of things because it felt so overwhelming. The idea of talking about money, especially when she didn't have a lot of it, made her stomach turn. But Dwayne had offered his support, and she wasn't about to let fear stop her now. Taking a deep breath, Ava replied, I'm still working on it, but I'm really stuck on the financials. I don't have much saved up, and the loans I've looked into seem impossible. I'm not sure what to do next. It only took a few moments for Dwayne's reply to come through. It's tough, I won't lie, but there are ways to make it work. Have you thought about crowdfunding? Ava blinked at the message. Crowdfunding? She had heard of it before, but she didn't know much about how it worked. It felt risky, but maybe that was what she needed. A chance to connect with people who believed in her dream. Crowdfunding? Ava typed back. How does that work? Dwayne replied almost immediately. It's all about telling your story. People love to support small businesses, especially ones that feel personal and authentic. If you can create a campaign that shows why your cafe matters to the community, you'll be surprised at how much support you can get. It's not easy, but it's a way to raise funds without the traditional bank route. Ava's heart raced as she read the message. It felt like a lifeline, a chance to get the funding she needed without relying on a bank loan. The idea of putting her dream out there, for the world to see, was both terrifying and exhilarating. What if people didn't believe in her? What if they didn't care? But Dwayne had a point. Crowdfunding was a way to connect with people who could see her vision. If she could convey her passion and her reasons for wanting to open this cafe, maybe, just maybe, they would want to help her make it happen. Ava sat back in her chair and thought about how she could frame her story. She had always been a storyteller, ever since she was young. She could weave her struggles, her dreams, and her love for cooking into something that would resonate with people. But would it be enough? She took another deep breath and began researching crowdfunding platforms. There were so many options, each one promising to help small businesses grow. But the idea of putting herself out there for the world to judge felt terrifying. Ava had always been someone who kept her struggles to herself. The thought of asking for money from strangers was foreign to her. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that this was her only chance. If she didn't take this leap, she might never get another opportunity. And so, with trembling hands, she began to write her crowdfunding campaign. She told her story, how she had grown up in a small town, raised by a hardworking single mother who had always taught her the value of resilience. How she had worked at Ella's Bistro for years, learning everything she could about the restaurant business, dreaming of one day opening her own cafe. How she had always wanted to create a place where people could come together over good food, where they could feel like they belonged. Ava wrote about the challenges she had faced, the financial struggles, the setbacks, the moments when she had almost given up. But most importantly, she wrote about why she couldn't give up. Why this cafe was more than just a business idea. It was a chance for her to create something that mattered, to build a community, to bring people together, and to finally take control of her own future. As she wrote, she felt a wave of emotions rise within her. There was vulnerability in putting her heart on the page, but there was also strength. She was telling her truth, and that felt empowering. After hours of editing and refining, Ava finally finished her campaign. She looked at it one last time, making sure everything was perfect. She knew it wasn't going to be easy, and she knew there would be bumps along the way, but she was ready to take the plunge. She hit submit. Ava leaned back in her chair, staring at the screen. Her heart pounded in her chest. She had done it. She had put her dream out into the world, and now she had to trust that people would see it, feel it, and believe in it. Her phone buzzed again. It was a message from Dwayne. "I'm so proud of you, Ava. You did it. Now the real work begins. Don't be afraid to reach out if you need help pushing the campaign. I'm with you all the way." Ava smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had taken a huge step today, and it felt like the beginning of something new. There was still a long road ahead, but for the first time, she believed it was possible. With the crowdfunding campaign launched and Dwayne's unwavering support behind her, Ava felt like she could face whatever challenges came next. The road ahead was still uncertain, but now she had hope, and that made all the difference. Ava couldn't believe her eyes. It had only been 3 days since she launched her crowdfunding campaign, and already, donations were trickling in. It wasn't a flood yet, but it was enough to make her heart skip a beat every time she refreshed the page. She leaned over her laptop, scanning the list of backers. Most of them were strangers, but there were a few familiar names, people from her community, her friends from work, and even a couple of her old high school classmates. Each donation was a sign that her dream was becoming real. Someone out there believed in her. Still, Ava couldn't help but feel a twinge of doubt. The amount she had raised so far was modest compared to the total she needed, but it was a start. She reminded herself that Rome wasn't built in a day. Every small contribution was one step closer to her goal. She sat back in her chair, closing her eyes for a moment, and let herself savor the feeling of hope. She had spent so many years feeling like she was stuck in a rut, like her dreams were always just out of reach. But now, with each donation, her vision was getting clearer. She was making progress. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Dwayne. "Hey, Ava, I saw your campaign. Looks like it's off to a good start. Have you thought about ways to keep the momentum going?" Ava quickly typed a reply. "Thanks, Dwayne. It's been slow, but I'm really grateful for every single donation. I'm just trying to figure out how to keep it moving. I'm not sure how to really push it yet." Dwayne's response came quickly. "It's all about keeping people engaged. Think about offering incentives for donations. Maybe a shout out to top contributors, or exclusive perks for people who pledge a certain amount. You could even create a sense of urgency. Let people know the campaign is ending soon and that they're a part of something special." Ava felt a spark of inspiration. Dwayne was right. She hadn't thought about offering perks. Maybe she could create a limited-time offer for those who pledged a certain amount, like a free drink or a special preview of the cafe when it opened. Something to make people feel like they were part of the journey, not just passive supporters. She spent the next few hours brainstorming ideas for rewards. After a lot of back and forth, she came up with a few tiers: $10 donation, a personalized thank you note and a shout-out on her social media pages, $50 donation, a free drink when the cafe opened and a handwritten note from Ava, $100 donation, an exclusive invitation to a soft opening event where backers could taste some of the food and coffee before the cafe opened to the public. It wasn't much, but it felt like a good start. Ava felt proud of herself for coming up with these incentives. She posted them on her campaign page and shared the updates on her social media, hoping to catch the attention of people who had been on the fence about donating. But even as she posted the updates, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She had put everything into her campaign, poured her heart into her story, but it still didn't feel like enough. She wasn't sure what she was waiting for, but she had this nagging sense that the breakthrough was just around the corner. She needed to push harder. The next day, she received a message that would change everything. It was from an unfamiliar number. At first, Ava almost ignored it. Another scam call, she thought, but something told her to open it. "Hi, Ava. My name is Jessica Palmer. I saw your campaign for your cafe, and I wanted to reach out. I'm a local businesswoman, and I think what you're doing is incredible. I'd love to meet with you and talk about your plans. I think we could help each other." Ava stared at the message, her heart racing. Jessica Palmer was a name she recognized. She was one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the city, known for her chain of organic coffee shops. Ava had always admired her from afar, reading about her success in magazines and following her on social media. This couldn't be real, could it? Was this a prank? Ava checked the number again, but it looked legitimate. Tentatively, she typed a response. "Hi Jessica, thank you so much for reaching out. I would love to meet and talk. I'm just getting started, and any advice or support would mean the world to me. When would be a good time to connect?" Jessica responded almost immediately. "How about tomorrow morning? I'm free for coffee at 10 a.m. I think it'll be great to hear your story and see if we can work something out." Ava's mind was racing. She had no idea what Jessica Palmer had in mind, but this was the opportunity she had been waiting for. Could this be the turning point in her campaign? Was this the kind of help that would take her dream from a small idea to something bigger than she ever imagined? The next morning, Ava arrived at the coffee shop early, her hands trembling slightly as she waited. She was nervous. This was a huge opportunity, and she didn't want to mess it up. When Jessica walked in, Ava almost couldn't believe her eyes. The woman exuded confidence, with a sharp business suit and a warm smile. "Hi Ava, it's so nice to meet you," Jessica said, extending a hand. "I've been following your campaign, and I have to say, I'm impressed. I think you're doing something really special." Ava smiled, trying to calm the nerves in her stomach. "Thank you, Jessica. I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with me." They sat down, and Jessica wasted no time getting to the point. "I think your idea has great potential. I can see the passion you have for it. What you need now is more than just donations. You need a mentor, someone who's been where you are and knows how to get to the next level. I'd love to help you with that." Ava's eyes widened. "You would? How?" Jessica smiled again, leaning forward. "Let me help you expand your network, get some connections, and figure out how to scale. I've been where you are. I know how tough it is, and I think we can make this work." Ava felt a surge of excitement. Was this really happening? Ava woke up with a new sense of purpose. The meeting with Jessica Palmer had gone better than she could have ever imagined. Not only had Jessica offered to help, but she had also introduced Ava to a few key people in the industry who could help her take her cafe to the next level. After their coffee meeting, Jessica had given Ava her business card and told her to reach out anytime. But it wasn't just words. Jessica meant it. The very next day, Jessica made a phone call on Ava's behalf to a local supplier, securing an appointment for Ava to meet with them and discuss sourcing ingredients for her cafe. Ava felt like she had stepped into a different world, a world where her dreams were no longer out of reach, but within her grasp. Her fingers trembled as she dialed the number for the supplier Jessica had recommended, and the voice on the other end of the line was warm and welcoming. "Hi, Ava. Jessica told me you'd be calling. We're really excited to meet with you. When can you come by?" Ava was stunned. Jessica had already made such a strong impression that the supplier was eager to help her. She set up a meeting for the following week, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, emails, and meetings. Jessica's contacts had begun to connect Ava with the right people, from interior designers to financial advisors. Each person had something to offer. Each conversation planted a seed of possibility. Ava was learning so much, faster than she had ever expected. She realized how much she had been doing on her own, with no real guidance, and how much she had yet to learn. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Ava sat down in front of her laptop to check the progress of her crowdfunding campaign. To her surprise, the donations had picked up again. It wasn't a huge spike, but the steady increase felt like a small victory. It seemed like people were starting to notice her efforts, and that gave her hope. The next big step came when Ava and Jessica met again. Jessica had invited Ava to a networking event for local entrepreneurs, and Ava couldn't pass up the opportunity. As nervous as she was, she knew this could be the moment that changed everything. At the event, Ava was introduced to a handful of people who could potentially be partners in her cafe venture. One of them, a local coffee roaster named Marco, was particularly interested in her concept. He had been following her crowdfunding campaign and was impressed by her passion. "I like your vision, Ava," Marco said as they stood by the food table. "I think we could work together. I'd love to supply your cafe with our beans. We have a great organic line, and I think it would really resonate with your customers." Ava's heart skipped a beat. Marco's company was exactly the type of supplier she had been hoping to work with. She exchanged contact information with him and promised to follow up after the event. The night was full of opportunities like that, people who were willing to take a chance on her, who believed in her dream. She could feel her network expanding, and with it, the possibilities for her cafe grew clearer. But even as things began to fall into place, Ava couldn't ignore the looming challenge of securing a location for her cafe. She had seen several potential spaces, but nothing felt quite right. Some were too small, others were too far from her target market. She had even considered a few places that were already under lease, but the idea of waiting months just to get a space didn't feel like the right move. The pressure was building. If she didn't find the right place soon, her dream could slip through her fingers. But Jessica had told her to trust the process, to take her time and find the right fit. Rushing into a space you're not sure about will only cause you more stress down the line, Jessica had said during one of their conversations. You'll know when it feels right. Ava was determined to keep that advice in mind. She couldn't afford to rush this decision. Her heart was set on creating a space that felt like home, a place that customers would want to visit time and time again. Days passed, and Ava continued her search. It wasn't easy. She visited dozens of spaces, and each time, she left feeling a little more discouraged. The perfect location seemed to elude her. One afternoon, just as she was about to give up for the day, Ava received an unexpected email. It was from the leasing agent for a small space she had looked at a few weeks ago. She had almost forgotten about it because she had felt it was too small, but the email changed everything. "Hi Ava, I hope you're well. I wanted to reach out because I've had some updates about the space you visited recently. The previous tenant is moving out sooner than expected, and the lease is available sooner than anticipated. If you're still interested, we'd love to schedule a viewing." Ava's heart raced as she read the email. This could be the break she had been waiting for. She immediately replied, setting up an appointment to view the space the following morning. The next day, Ava walked through the doors of the cafe space once more. This time, it felt different. The light pouring in through the windows seemed warmer, and she could almost picture her customers sitting at the tables, sipping coffee and chatting with friends. The small space felt intimate and cozy in a way that made her heart swell with excitement. It was the perfect size, not too big, but just enough to create the welcoming atmosphere she had always dreamed of. As she stood there, imagining the future, Ava felt a sense of peace wash over her. This was it. This was the place. She immediately called Jessica to share the good news. "Jessica, I think I found the one. It's not perfect, but it's everything I need. It's small, but it has so much potential." Jessica's voice was full of excitement. "That's amazing, Ava. You'll make it perfect with your vision. I'm so proud of you." Ava smiled, feeling a rush of gratitude. She had come so far in such a short time, and now, the future of her cafe was starting to take shape. Ava sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by a pile of paperwork and notes, her mind spinning. The cafe space she had found was perfect, but there was still so much to figure out. The space was small, just under 1,500 square feet, and it had potential, but it also came with its own set of challenges. The lease was a bit more than she had planned for, and the renovations were going to cost more than she had anticipated. The clock on the wall ticked relentlessly as Ava stared at the numbers in front of her. She had enough in her crowdfunding account to cover part of the renovations, but not nearly enough to fully furnish the space, buy equipment, and cover the initial operating costs. She had made progress, yes. She had people who believed in her, and were ready to help. Marco, the coffee roaster, was on board, and he was even offering her a discount on the beans to help her get started. Jessica had connected her with a few investors, but Ava wasn't sure if she was ready to take that step. The thought of giving up a part of her dream to someone else felt overwhelming. Ava glanced at the bank statement on her laptop again, then closed the lid with a sigh. She needed to talk to someone about this, someone who could help her see the bigger picture. Maybe I'm overthinking it, she muttered to herself. I just need to trust the process. But her gut told her it wasn't that simple. She had come so far, and it was almost time to make a decision. She needed more capital to make this work, and without it, she risked losing everything she had worked for. She picked up her phone and dialed Jessica's number. "Hey, Ava. What's up?" Jessica answered, her voice warm and familiar. "I think I need your advice," Ava said, trying to steady her nerves. "I've found the perfect location for the cafe, but I'm hitting a wall when it comes to financing the renovations. The lease is higher than I thought, and I'm just not sure how to stretch my budget." Jessica was quiet for a moment, considering Ava's words. "I get it. I've been there. Starting a cafe is never cheap, but the good news is you've got options. You could try a small business loan, or you could look into bringing on a silent partner to help with the investment. But if you're not ready for that, there are also grants available for small businesses like yours. Have you looked into that?" Ava sat up straighter. "Grants?" "Yeah," Jessica replied. "There are a lot of organizations and government programs that offer grants for small businesses, especially if you're focused on community building and sustainability, like you are. It's worth doing some research." Ava felt a wave of relief wash over her. Grants. It hadn't even occurred to her. She had been so focused on crowdfunding and the possibility of taking on investors that she had neglected to consider other funding sources. "Thanks, Jessica," Ava said, her voice full of gratitude. "I'll look into it. You've been so helpful through all of this." "No problem at all," Jessica said, her tone warm and reassuring. "Remember, you're not alone in this. You've got a whole community behind you." Ava smiled. "I can't believe how far I've come. I'm not sure I would have made it this far without your help." "You would have," Jessica said with certainty. "You've got the drive, Ava. That's the hardest part." After hanging up, Ava immediately began researching small business grants. She was surprised at how many opportunities were available, especially for businesses that had a clear social impact. She felt her heart lift as she read through the qualifications for several grants, realizing that her cafe, focused on community building, sustainability, and supporting local farmers, was exactly the type of business that could qualify. Ava spent the next few days compiling the necessary documents and writing her grant applications. It was a lot of work, but she felt more confident now that she had a clear direction. With Jessica's advice and the newfound knowledge of grants available to small business owners, Ava felt like she was moving closer to her goal. The days turned into weeks, and as she worked tirelessly on her cafe, Ava couldn't help but think back to the moment when she first launched her crowdfunding campaign. It had felt like a long shot then, but now, with the space secured and a clearer financial plan in place, everything seemed possible. But even as things were beginning to fall into place, there was one more challenge on the horizon. Ava had spent months creating a vision for her cafe, from the interior design to the menu. But now that she was so close to making it a reality, she faced a question she had been avoiding. How would she handle the staff? She had already hired a few people, mostly friends and family, but as her vision for the cafe expanded, she realized that she would need a full team of employees to make it all work. She couldn't do it alone. But hiring staff wasn't as simple as just finding people to fill the positions. She wanted to build a team that truly shared her vision and understood the heart of the cafe. She wanted to hire people who were passionate about great food, great coffee, and great service. She wanted employees who would feel like family. Ava spent time crafting job descriptions, interviewing potential candidates, and building a team that she felt would embody the spirit of her cafe. She wanted to create a place where employees felt valued, where they could grow alongside the business. The more she worked on building the team, the more she realized how much she had grown as an entrepreneur. She was no longer just a woman with a dream. She was a business owner, building something from the ground up. The challenges she faced only made her more determined to succeed. As she signed the lease for her new cafe and finalized the details for the renovations, Ava couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. It wasn't just about opening a cafe anymore. It was about creating a space that could bring people together, support the community, and make a difference in people's lives. It wasn't going to be easy, but Ava was ready. She was no longer just hoping for success. She was working for it every single day. Ava stood in the center of her soon-to-be cafe, her hard hat slightly askew as she surveyed the progress of the renovation. The space was beginning to take shape, but it was a far cry from the cozy, welcoming cafe she had envisioned. The walls were bare, the floors unfinished, and the plumbing was still being worked on. She had expected this. Renovations were always a messy process, but the stress was starting to get to her. The work was taking longer than anticipated, and every delay seemed to push her opening date further into the future. She had budgeted for the renovations, but now it seemed like the costs were mounting faster than she could keep track of. Ava checked her phone for any updates. She had been in constant communication with the contractor, and the latest message didn't offer much good news. The plumbing issue is worse than we thought. We'll need to order more parts, which means another 2 days of work. Sorry for the inconvenience. Ava groaned and ran a hand through her hair. The delays felt like they were piling on top of each other. The walls were still bare, the electrical work hadn't been finished, and the contractor's new estimate had pushed her budget up by 20%. Great, she muttered, pacing the space. Just great. She thought back to her earlier days, when she had first dreamed of opening this cafe. Everything had felt so exciting, so full of potential. But now, it was all about managing problems, dealing with unexpected costs, and hoping that it would all come together in time. She couldn't afford to let herself get discouraged. But sometimes, that's exactly what it felt like. One problem after another, one obstacle after another. Ava checked the time and realized that her meeting with Marco, the coffee roaster, was coming up in less than an hour. She quickly texted him, confirming their meeting, and then took a deep breath. As much as she hated to admit it, she needed the meeting with Marco. Her budget was tight, and she had to ensure that she was getting the best possible deal for the coffee beans. Marco had been kind enough to offer her a discount, but she knew she couldn't push him too hard. When she arrived at the coffee roastery, she was greeted by Marco, who led her through the back of the warehouse where the beans were stored. The room smelled rich with the aroma of freshly roasted coffee, and Ava couldn't help but feel a small spark of excitement. Everything okay with the space? Marco asked as they sat down at a small table. Last time we spoke, you seemed like you were making progress. Ava smiled weakly, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. Yeah, well, it's been a little more complicated than I expected. We're running into some issues with the renovations, and it's pushing my timeline back. Not to mention the costs. Everything is starting to add up. Marco nodded sympathetically. Renovations are always a headache. Trust me, I know. But the important thing is, you've got a vision, Ava. That's what keeps you going. Ava looked up at Marco, grateful for his understanding. She had always admired how calm and grounded he seemed, despite running his own business. I appreciate that, she said, taking a sip of the coffee he'd poured for her. But I'm starting to wonder if I'm in over my head. It feels like there's always something else I need to fix, and I don't know how much longer I can keep going like this. Marco studied her for a moment, then leaned back in his chair. Starting a business isn't for the faint of heart. But you're tough, Ava. I've seen the way you're handling things, and I have no doubt you'll make it work. You've got the right attitude. If you need a little extra help, I'm happy to offer some financial advice or even connect you with a few people who might be able to help you secure more funding. Ava felt a surge of gratitude toward Marco. His kindness and support meant more to her than he probably realized. Thank you, Marco, she said softly. I'll keep that in mind. As they discussed the specifics of the coffee beans, Ava started to feel a little better. The meeting wasn't just about business. It was about reassurance. Reassurance that she was on the right path, that she wasn't alone in this journey. She was building something important, and even though the road ahead was filled with obstacles, she could get through it. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Ava stayed in close contact with the contractor, trying to get the renovations back on track. She also reached out to some potential investors who had shown interest in her cafe, hoping to secure the extra capital she needed to finish the project. The pressure was mounting, and the exhaustion was starting to set in. But Ava was determined to push forward. Every morning, she woke up early to check on the progress at the cafe, and every evening, she worked on her business plan, tweaking it for potential investors. She kept herself busy with tasks, trying to stay ahead of everything that needed to be done. But despite her best efforts, the delays continued. The plumbing issue took longer to resolve than expected, and the electrical work was still nowhere near finished. Ava had to make some tough decisions. She called her family together one evening, feeling the weight of everything pressing on her shoulders. Her mother, father, and younger brother sat around the dinner table, waiting for her to speak. "I need your help," Ava said, her voice trembling with the weight of the words. "I've been pushing myself to make this work on my own, but I'm running out of time and money. I need a loan from the family to help cover the cost of the renovations." Her mother looked at her with concern, while her father nodded thoughtfully. "How much do you need, Ava?" he asked. Ava hesitated, then told them the amount she needed to get the renovations done. It wasn't an easy request, but she knew she had no other choice. Her family had always supported her dreams, but this felt like a big ask. After a long pause, her father spoke. "We believe in you, Ava. You've always been a hard worker. We'll help you out." Ava's heart swelled with gratitude. "Thank you, Dad. Thank you both." It wasn't an ideal solution, but it would be enough to get her through the toughest part of the renovations. And for that, Ava was incredibly thankful. Ava sat at the small desk in the back office of her cafe, staring at the stack of paperwork in front of her. The cafe was still in the midst of renovations, but she couldn't afford to take her eye off the bigger picture. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Marco. "The beans are ready to go. Let me know when you want to pick them up." Ava smiled faintly. Marco's message was a small glimmer of hope in the middle of all the chaos. The coffee was coming together. That part was at least going according to plan. But the rest? The rest was becoming more of a nightmare than she had ever imagined. She ran a hand through her hair, the weight of everything crashing down on her. The renovations were still behind schedule. The contractor's new estimates were forcing her to push back her opening date again, and the loan from her family, while a blessing, was a constant reminder of how much pressure she was under. She didn't want to fail them, not after everything they had done for her. The cafe space was slowly coming together, but Ava had to face the reality of the situation. The delays and rising costs were eating away at her savings, and she had no more room for mistakes. The risk of it all weighed heavily on her chest. If she didn't get this right, she would lose everything. Her stomach churned with anxiety, and she couldn't sit still. She stood up, pacing the room. She had come so far, taken risks, made sacrifices, and now it felt like it was all falling apart. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a notification from the cafe's social media page. "Are you still opening? We can't wait to try your menu." Ava's heart skipped a beat. People were excited. People were waiting. She couldn't disappoint them. She couldn't let them down. But the overwhelming weight of everything, her finances, her family's sacrifice, her employees' expectations, was beginning to feel suffocating. She had built this up in her head for so long. She had imagined the grand opening, the excitement, the customers pouring in, the success. But now, it all felt like an impossible dream. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a knock on the door. It was Jessica. Ava sighed with relief. "Hey, come in." Jessica walked into the room, her usual calm demeanor a welcome contrast to the chaos that Ava felt inside. "How are you holding up?" she asked, her voice gentle but firm. Ava gave a hollow laugh. "I'm not sure I can keep up anymore. The renovations are a mess. My family gave me a loan to keep things going, and I don't know how much longer I can do this." Jessica moved to the desk and sat down across from her, folding her arms. "Ava, look at me." Ava met Jessica's eyes, feeling the weight of her words. "I know it feels impossible right now," Jessica continued, "but think about everything you've already accomplished. You're here. You're still going. You've made it through worse, and you're stronger than you think." Ava shook her head, feeling overwhelmed. "It doesn't feel like it. Every time I think I'm making progress, something else goes wrong." "I know," Jessica said softly, But this is what it takes. It's not easy. It never will be. But that's why so many people fail. They give up when it gets hard. You're not giving up. You're still in it. Ava felt a lump form in her throat, her eyes threatening to tear up. She had been so focused on all the things that were going wrong that she hadn't taken a moment to step back and appreciate how far she had come. I feel like I'm drowning, Ava confessed, her voice shaky. I don't know how to keep going. Jessica reached out and placed a reassuring hand on Ava's. You're not drowning, Ava. You're swimming. You just have to keep going. One stroke at a time. This cafe. It's going to change lives. It's going to be everything you dreamed of. But you've got to keep pushing, no matter how tough it gets. Ava took a deep breath, letting Jessica's words sink in. She had come so far, but she couldn't give up now. Not when she was so close. I can't do this alone, Ava admitted quietly. You don't have to, Jessica replied. You've got people who believe in you, who are willing to help. And I'm one of them. You've got a whole community waiting to see you succeed. Ava's eyes welled with tears, and she wiped them away quickly, embarrassed by her vulnerability. But for the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of clarity. She had to keep going. She couldn't back down now. Jessica stood up and smiled. You've got this, Ava. I believe in you. As Jessica left the office, Ava sat in silence for a moment. The room felt still, the chaos of the world outside somehow softened by the conversation. She could do this. She had to do this. Ava stood up, walking over to the large windows overlooking the street. She could almost picture it. Customers lined up outside, excited to step into her cafe. She imagined the warm, inviting space, the delicious aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air, the hum of conversation and laughter. But the journey to get there wouldn't be easy. There were still obstacles to overcome. More delays, more setbacks, more tough decisions. But she couldn't quit now. She wasn't just building a cafe. She was building a dream. And dreams, no matter how big, were never meant to be easy. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Ava sat at the small table in the cafe, her fingers drumming nervously against the surface. The space had come a long way since the first day of renovations. The walls were painted, the floors were finally done, and the kitchen was almost ready to go. The contractors were finishing up the final touches, but there was still so much to be done. Today was supposed to be a milestone. The first official meeting with a potential investor who had expressed interest in her business. The excitement had been palpable when she'd first scheduled the meeting. It felt like everything was falling into place, like this was the moment that would push her over the edge and into success. But now, as the meeting loomed just hours away, Ava found herself paralyzed with doubt. She had spent countless hours perfecting her pitch, ensuring everything was in order, but the pressure of knowing that this meeting could make or break her was starting to feel suffocating. She glanced at her phone. No new messages. She was alone in her thoughts, and those thoughts weren't being kind. What if she wasn't ready for this? What if she failed? Ava knew she had been lucky to get this far. She had gotten help from her family, some financial backing from Marco, and her own hard work. But still, the mounting pressure of the situation felt like it was closing in on her. She had always prided herself on being self-sufficient, but she was beginning to realize that some things were beyond her control. The door to the cafe jingled as it opened, and Ava looked up. It was Jessica. Hey, Jessica said, her smile warm as always. How's it going? Ava let out a long sigh. I'm not sure I can do this. The investor meeting is in a few hours, and I'm freaking out. I thought I was ready, but now, I don't know. Jessica pulled up a chair and sat across from Ava, her expression softening with concern. What's going on? You've worked so hard to get here. You've got this. Ava shook her head, feeling the weight of her words. I don't know if I do. The renovations aren't even finished yet. I'm already over budget, and I'm about to take on more debt just to get the cafe open. If the investor doesn't come through, I'll be in serious trouble. Jessica reached across the table and placed a reassuring hand on Ava's. You've always been a fighter. You've been through worse than this, right? You just need to believe in yourself. And remember, This investor is only one part of the equation. There are other ways to keep things going if this doesn't work out. Ava nodded, but the doubt didn't fade. She had put everything into this cafe. Her savings, her family's loan, her reputation, everything. If she didn't get this right, she didn't know how she would recover. "I'm scared, Jess," Ava admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if it all falls apart? What if I'm not cut out for this? What if I've made a mistake?" Jessica's expression softened, and she stood up, walking around the table to stand beside Ava. She placed a hand on her shoulder. "I won't sugarcoat it. It's hard. You're going to face more challenges than you can imagine. But I know you, Ava. I know how much you care about this. This cafe means everything to you. You're doing it for a reason." Ava swallowed hard, blinking back the tears that were threatening to spill over. "I just don't know if I can keep doing this." "You can," Jessica said firmly. "But you need to decide what's more important, getting the investor or making sure you have the right foundation in place. Don't rush into anything that doesn't feel right. You've come this far. Take a deep breath and think about what you truly need." Ava let Jessica's words sink in. For the first time in a long while, she felt like someone understood her struggle. Jessica wasn't just a friend. She was a reminder that Ava didn't have to carry the weight of everything alone. There were people who cared, who believed in her, and who wanted to see her succeed. The decision was hers to make. Ava had worked so hard to get to this point, but maybe she was rushing. Maybe she needed to slow down and take a step back. She stood up, taking a deep breath. "I think you're right. I need to make sure I'm not putting myself in a worse position by rushing into something I'm not ready for." Jessica smiled. "That's the Ava I know." Ava paced the room, trying to calm her racing thoughts. She had already gone through every worst-case scenario in her head, but now she needed to focus on the bigger picture. If the investor didn't come through, it wasn't the end of the world. It might just mean she needed to look for other ways to fund the cafe. There were always other options: crowdfunding, small loans, community support. She had built this business with heart and determination, and that would carry her further than any investor could. She glanced at the clock. The meeting was in less than an hour. But instead of rushing out the door to meet the investor, Ava made a choice. She wasn't going to settle for just any deal. She wasn't going to take on more debt than she could handle or risk everything on a single meeting. She needed to be smart about this, even if it meant making tough choices. Ava picked up her phone and sent a quick message to the investor. "Thank you so much for your interest in my cafe. After careful consideration, I've decided to delay the meeting for now. I need to ensure I'm in the best position to move forward and make the most informed decisions for my business. I hope we can reconnect at a later date." With a sense of relief washing over her, Ava sat back down. She had made the right decision. She wasn't ready to rush into anything that didn't feel right. She was building something lasting, and that was worth waiting for. Ava sat at the small table in the cafe, her mind still buzzing from the decision she had made to delay the meeting with the investor. The sense of relief that had washed over her yesterday still lingered, but now it was replaced by a quiet determination. The future of her cafe was still uncertain, but for the first time in weeks, she felt like she was in control again. The walls around her seemed to pulse with potential. The sound of the contractors hammering echoed in the background, a reminder that things were still in progress. There was still so much to do before the cafe could open its doors, but Ava knew that rushing had never been the answer. She had to make sure that everything was in place before she moved forward. "Good morning." Jessica's cheerful voice interrupted her thoughts as she walked into the cafe with a tray of freshly baked pastries. "I brought the goods. These will be perfect for the opening." Ava smiled and stood up to help her friend with the tray. The warm scent of the pastries filled the air, a welcome change from the sterile smell of paint and construction dust. "Thanks, Jess. These look amazing." Jessica placed the tray on the counter, her eyes scanning the room. "You're starting to get everything together. It's looking good in here." Ava glanced around. The cafe space was slowly coming to life. The chairs and tables were in place, and the soft lighting created a warm, welcoming atmosphere. The kitchen was nearly ready, with equipment installed and the countertop gleaming. But even though it was starting to take shape, Ava knew she couldn't afford to let her guard down. "Yeah, but there's still so much left to do," Ava said. her voice tinged with frustration. I've made progress, but it's like the more I cross off the list, the more things get added. Jessica chuckled and took a seat at one of the tables. That's the beauty of opening a business. There's always something new to tackle. Ava sat down opposite her, letting out a long breath. I'm just trying to figure out the next step. I delayed the investor meeting, but now I'm thinking I might need to explore other options. I just don't want to keep putting everything on the line if I don't know it's going to work. Jessica leaned forward, her expression serious. That's smart. You've got to make sure you're not jumping into something that could hurt you in the long run. Maybe you can find some alternative funding, something less risky. Ava nodded, her mind racing. I've been thinking about that. Crowdfunding might be an option. It would involve a lot of work, but it could help me raise some money while also building a community around the cafe. Exactly, Jessica said, her eyes lighting up. If people are excited about your vision, they'll want to support you. Plus, you can offer rewards, like free coffee or special events for backers. It'll create a sense of ownership and loyalty. Ava's heart began to race. It wasn't the easiest option, but it felt like a path she could walk with more control. If she could tap into the community's excitement for her cafe, she could raise the funds she needed without giving up too much of her vision. I think I'll look into it, Ava said, feeling a spark of excitement she hadn't felt in weeks. It's not the easy way out, but it could be the best option for me right now. I don't want to take on more debt if I don't have to. Jessica smiled. That's the spirit. You've got this. Whatever you decide, I'm here to help. Ava stood up, the weight of her decision beginning to feel lighter. She felt like she was finally starting to see the bigger picture. There was no rush. She had time to build something solid, something lasting. Thanks, Jess. I think this might be exactly what I need. Over the next few days, Ava dove into the world of crowdfunding. She researched different platforms, wrote up a compelling campaign description, and started putting together incentives for potential backers. It was a lot of work, but it felt right. She wasn't just asking for money. She was inviting people to be part of her dream. She wanted them to feel like they were helping build something from the ground up, and in return, they'd get a piece of the experience. As she worked late into the night, piecing together her campaign, she felt a sense of purpose return. This wasn't just about funding her cafe anymore. It was about creating something that people could believe in. It was about building a community around her business, a community that would support her when times got tough. The morning of the campaign launch, Ava sat at her desk, her fingers trembling slightly as she hit the Submit button. The campaign was live. Her phone buzzed almost immediately. It was a notification from the crowdfunding platform. A donation had been made. Ava's heart skipped a beat. She clicked on the notification, seeing the name of the first backer, Marco Rodriguez. He had donated a substantial amount to her campaign, a gesture that filled her with both gratitude and a renewed sense of responsibility. The rest of the day was a whirlwind. People began to share her campaign on social media, excited to see the cafe come to life. Donations started rolling in, and Ava couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the support. Every little bit helped, but it wasn't just the money. It was the belief that people had in her vision. As the days passed, the momentum grew. The crowdfunding campaign continued to gain traction, and Ava's stress began to ease. She was still far from her goal, but the support she was receiving was tangible. For the first time in months, she felt like she was moving forward. The relief was bittersweet, though. The cafe was still a work in progress, and there was still so much to do. But now, Ava had a sense of control. She wasn't at the mercy of an investor or the looming threat of more debt. She was building something on her own terms, with the people who believed in her by her side. That night, after a long day of work, Ava stood in the middle of the cafe. The lights dimmed, the space nearly empty except for the sound of her own thoughts. She took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the space around her. She wasn't just building a cafe. She was building a future. The morning after launching her crowdfunding campaign, Ava woke up to a flood of notifications on her phone. It was like the universe had thrown her a lifeline. Backers were pledging, people were sharing her campaign, and the momentum felt real. As she scrolled through the messages, Ava felt a mixture of excitement and disbelief. There were still weeks to go before her campaign would close, but the first few days had been promising. Every dollar raised brought her closer to her goal, but more importantly, it made her believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't crazy for pursuing this dream. She quickly glanced at the calendar on her phone. The opening date for the cafe was still a few months off, but she was beginning to realize that the time between now and then would be filled with hard work, setbacks, and triumphs. Nothing would come easy. "Hey, Ava." Jessica's voice echoed through the cafe door, snapping her out of her thoughts. She looked up to see her friend standing there, a bag of supplies slung over her shoulder. Ava stood up, grinning. "Hey, what's in the bag?" "Some new decor ideas," Jessica said with a wink. "Thought we could add a few personal touches to the space. Plus, I brought some of those handmade signs you liked. You know, the ones with the quirky quotes." Ava's smile widened. "You know me too well." She walked over and took the bag from Jessica, rifling through it to find the little signs that had become a symbol of everything she wanted her cafe to represent: warmth, personality, and a little bit of humor. As Jessica began unpacking more items, Ava's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Marco. "I see the campaign is going well. How are you holding up?" Ava felt a twinge of guilt. Marco had been instrumental in helping her get this far, offering advice and financial support when things seemed impossible. Yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was still carrying the weight of the cafe's future alone. Even though she had a growing community behind her, Marco was the one person who had truly believed in her from the start. "It's going better than I expected. Still a long way to go, but I'm feeling hopeful. Thanks again for all your help." She hit send and sighed. She wasn't sure if she would be able to pay him back the money he had loaned her, but the least she could do was make sure the cafe was a success. It was all she could think about now, making sure her dreams didn't fade into the background, like so many others had before. "I'm so glad you're feeling good about the campaign," Jessica said as she adjusted one of the signs on the wall. "I can see it in your face. But hey, you've got to keep your head in the game. There's still a lot to do." Ava nodded, though her mind was already on the next thing. "Yeah, I know, but I'm starting to feel like maybe we're finally getting somewhere." As if on cue, the sound of footsteps echoed through the cafe, and Ava turned to see one of the contractors walking in. His face was set in a serious expression, his brows furrowed as he glanced around the space. "Everything okay?" Ava asked, immediately sensing that something was wrong. He ran a hand through his hair, looking slightly frustrated. "We hit a snag with the plumbing. It's going to delay the project by at least a week, maybe more. We need to reroute some of the pipes. I'll get a quote for you once we figure out the specifics." Ava's stomach dropped. "Are you serious? We don't have time for delays like this. We're already behind schedule." "I know," the contractor replied. "I'm sorry, but this is a big issue that needs to be addressed before we move forward with anything else. It'll add to your costs, too." Ava's heart began to race. The budget had already been tight, and now it was stretching even thinner. Another setback. Just what she needed. She stepped back, running a hand through her hair, trying to process the information. This was exactly what she had feared. Something always seemed to go wrong when she least expected it. A plumbing issue could lead to more delays, more costs, and a cafe opening that wasn't going to happen on time. "Can we work around it?" Ava asked, her voice tinged with frustration. The contractor shook his head. "Not without compromising the quality of the work. I'd rather we fix it now than have to redo things later." "Okay," Ava said, trying to keep her composure. "Get the quote, and I'll figure out what we can do." As the contractor left, Jessica walked over and placed a hand on Ava's shoulder. "Hey, don't let this get to you. You've been through worse. You can handle this." Ava forced a smile. "I know. It's a lot. One thing after another. I get it. But remember, you're not alone. You've got your backers now, and you've got me." Ava nodded, though the doubt lingered. The plumbing issue was just one example of the countless obstacles she knew were coming. She could feel the pressure building, but she also knew that if she wanted her cafe to be a success, she had to keep moving forward. Later that evening, Ava took a deep breath as she sat down at her laptop. She had a long list of tasks ahead of her: negotiating with contractors, adjusting her budget, reaching out to more potential backers. The path ahead wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time in a long time, She felt like she was ready for the challenge. She opened her email to send out an update to her crowdfunding backers. Her message would be straightforward, telling them about the delay, the plumbing issue, and the extra expenses. Ava wasn't going to sugarcoat anything. She knew that honesty would get her farther than pretending everything was perfect. As she typed the words, a sense of clarity washed over her. The cafe was more than just a business. It was a journey, a test of patience, resilience, and faith. She wasn't going to let a few bumps in the road derail her. Once the email was sent, Ava leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes for a moment. There were still weeks of work ahead and a million challenges to face. But she was in control now. She was ready for whatever came next. Ava stood in the middle of the cafe, arms crossed, staring at the empty space before her. The walls were freshly painted. The kitchen was nearly complete, but something still felt off. It wasn't that the space lacked potential. It was that the weight of the delays and setbacks had started to settle in her chest, weighing her down. The plumbing issue was resolved, but at a higher cost than she had anticipated. The crowdfunding campaign had stalled for a few days, and with the cafe opening date looming, Ava couldn't shake the feeling that time was slipping away from her. Every day felt like a race against the clock, and yet, the more she pushed, the more the uncertainty grew. She'd barely had time to catch her breath when Jessica called with an unexpected idea. "Hey, Ava, I've got something you should hear. I think it could be just what you need right now." Ava raised an eyebrow. "What's going on?" "I know you're under a lot of pressure, and I've been talking to this local bakery owner, Lila Matthews. She owns Sweet Bloom's Bakery across town. She's been in business for about 5 years, and her bakery's really taken off. We've been friends for a while, and she's been looking for a place to expand her brand." Ava felt a flicker of interest. "Okay, I'm listening. What's her idea?" Jessica continued, her voice growing more animated. "Well, she loves your concept. She's interested in collaborating. Maybe we could feature her pastries in the cafe. Her baked goods are incredibly popular, and she's been looking for a space to expand her customer base. If we partnered up, we could really help each other." Ava sat down on the counter, trying to absorb what Jessica was saying. A partnership? With a local business? She had never considered it, but the idea felt almost too good to be true. "Are you saying we'd sell her pastries here? In the cafe?" Ava asked slowly. "Exactly. Think about it. You're already building a community around your cafe, and Lila has a loyal customer base. If we teamed up, we could attract her customers while also providing something extra for your own. It's a win-win, especially with your cafe just starting out." Ava ran her hand through her hair, the idea taking root in her mind. A partnership could be the perfect solution to several of her problems. Sweet Blooms had an established customer base, and if Ava could get them to try her cafe, it could give her the boost she needed. The cafe would stand out by offering unique, high-quality pastries, something to set it apart from the competition. "Okay," Ava said, her voice steady but hesitant. "But how do we make sure this is the right move? I don't want to take on another responsibility if it's going to hurt the cafe." Jessica's voice softened. "I understand your hesitation, but think of this as an opportunity to share the workload. You won't be doing everything yourself. Plus, Lila's got a great reputation. You won't have to worry about her products." Ava paused, thinking about the idea. It was true. If she could collaborate with Lila, they could create a unique experience for customers, combining her cafe's atmosphere with Sweet Bloom's delicious pastries. The concept of a partnership wasn't just about adding something new to the menu. It was about forming an alliance that could help both businesses grow. "I'll think about it," Ava said, still processing everything. "But I need to meet her first. We need to be on the same page." "I'll set it up," Jessica promised. "I think this could be the start of something really special." Later that week, Ava met Lila Matthews at Sweet Bloom's Bakery. The moment she walked in, Ava could feel the warmth of the place. Warm lighting, the smell of freshly baked bread, and the hum of satisfied customers chatting with the staff. It was a cozy space, and the quality of the pastries was immediately apparent. Ava had heard about Sweet Blooms, but seeing it in person made her realize just how much potential the partnership had. Lila, a petite woman with short cropped hair and a warm smile, greeted Ava with a handshake. It's so nice to finally meet you in person, Lila said. Jessica's told me so much about you, and I've been following your progress with the cafe. It's exciting to see someone with such a clear vision. Thanks, Lila, Ava replied, returning the smile. I've heard a lot about Sweet Blooms. Your pastries are incredible. Lila grinned. I appreciate that. I've spent years perfecting these recipes. I think we could really do something amazing together. Ava took a seat at one of the small tables, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. Lila's energy was infectious, and it made Ava feel like this collaboration might actually be the missing piece she had been looking for. So, tell me more about your vision for this partnership, Ava said, eager to hear Lila's ideas. I think we could do something special, Lila said, her eyes lighting up. Your cafe's atmosphere and the pastries I make. It's the perfect combination. I'd love to provide a selection of my pastries for your cafe, and in exchange, we could promote both businesses. I'd feature your cafe in my shop, and you could offer some of my signature treats. Plus, we could host events together. Imagine a tasting night or a pastry class. It's a great way to get more foot traffic for both of us. Ava felt a rush of excitement. This was the kind of collaboration she had been looking for. Something organic, something that would benefit both businesses. I love that idea, she said, nodding. Let's make it happen. The two of them spent the next hour discussing details, everything from logistics to marketing. They agreed on a trial period, where Sweet Blooms would supply Ava's cafe with a rotating selection of pastries, and they would co-host an event to introduce their collaboration to the public. By the time Ava left Sweet Blooms that afternoon, she was buzzing with energy. The cafe had a new direction, a new partnership, and a fresh sense of hope. She had been scared of losing control, but now she realized that sometimes it was okay to lean on others. As she drove home, Ava couldn't help but smile. The path ahead was still filled with challenges, but she wasn't walking it alone anymore. And that made all the difference. Ava woke up early, as she had done for the past several weeks, to the sound of her alarm ringing through the quiet apartment. She had barely slept the night before, her mind racing with thoughts about her new partnership with Sweet Bloom's Bakery. Everything had moved so fast, the idea, the planning, the agreement. It felt like the first day of the rest of her life. She sat up, rubbing her eyes, and glanced at the clock. It was still dark outside, but the cafe needed her. It always did. After a quick breakfast, she grabbed her phone to check the latest update on her crowdfunding campaign. The numbers had plateaued for a few days, but her backers were still showing support. The more Ava looked at it, the more she realized that it wasn't just the financial backing that mattered. It was the community she was building around the cafe, the people who believed in her. But today felt different. She couldn't put her finger on it, but there was an undercurrent of anxiety gnawing at her. Something wasn't sitting right. The door to the cafe swung open as Jessica walked in, carrying a stack of papers. "Morning, Ava," she greeted cheerfully. "I've got the marketing strategy ideas from Lila's team. They're really on board with promoting this partnership, and I think we've got some great options." Ava smiled weakly. "Good. Let's take a look." As Jessica began to lay out the promotional ideas, flyers, social media campaigns, joint events, Ava found herself distracted. The thought of her responsibilities felt heavier today. She was still handling all the logistics of the cafe, managing the budget, overseeing the renovations, and now coordinating with Lila on the bakery supplies. It was a lot, and while the partnership was proving to be promising, it was also putting more pressure on her shoulders than she had anticipated. Jessica paused, looking at Ava with concern. "Hey, you okay?" Ava's gaze drifted to the window, her eyes unfocused. "Yeah, just overwhelmed, I guess." Jessica set the papers down on the counter and walked over. "I get it. You've got a lot going on. But you're not in this alone. You've got me, and you've got Lila. We're all here to help." Ava nodded, but deep down, the doubt lingered. She had always prided herself on doing things on her own. It was a difficult habit to break, especially now that the cafe was starting to feel like it was on the verge of something big. Yet, with that success came a new set of challenges. Later that day, Ava had a meeting with Lila at the cafe to finalize the details of their collaboration. They sat at one of the small tables, sipping coffee and discussing everything from pastry options to how they would structure the events. Lila leaned forward, excitement in her eyes. I think the tasting event would be perfect for opening day. We could invite all of our loyal customers and make it a celebration. People love that kind of thing, and it will give them a chance to see what we're doing together. Ava's mind was elsewhere, though. The more they talked about it, the more she felt like she was losing control over her original vision for the cafe. She hadn't planned to offer pastries from another business on opening day. She had imagined something different, something that felt more her. She wanted the cafe to be a reflection of her and her journey, not just a place for others to showcase their products. I like the idea, Ava said slowly, her voice betraying her uncertainty, but I'm just wondering if it's moving too fast. I don't want to overshadow what the cafe's really about. Lila looked at her with understanding. I get it. This is your baby, and I don't want to make it feel like it's not. But think about it. Your cafe is about more than just coffee and a menu. It's about building community. And that's what this partnership is about too. We're not taking away from your vision. We're adding to it. Ava took a deep breath, the words sinking in. She didn't want to let fear or pride keep her from making the right decision. Lila was right. The cafe was about more than just her. It was about creating a space for everyone who walked through the door. The partnership with Sweet Blooms wasn't a threat to that vision. It was an opportunity to enhance it. I'll think about it more, Ava said finally, her voice steady. But I'm leaning toward yes. Over the next few weeks, the cafe began to take shape. The walls were painted, the furniture arrived, and the kitchen was fully stocked. But as the opening day drew closer, the weight of the pressure grew heavier. Every decision, every conversation felt like it carried more significance than the last. The balance between her dreams and reality was becoming harder to maintain. Then, an unexpected phone call threw everything off course. Ava, it's Marco, said the familiar voice on the other end. I need to talk to you about the loan. We've hit a rough patch, and the bank is demanding a payment sooner than I thought. Ava felt a knot form in her stomach. The loan was a constant source of anxiety. She hadn't even thought about it in weeks, focusing instead on the cafe and her new partnership. But hearing Marco's voice now, she realized just how much she had been avoiding the reality of her financial situation. Marco, I don't know if I can make that payment right now. The cafe is still in its early stages, and things are tight. There was a pause on the other end. I get it, Ava, but I can't keep covering for you forever. You need to figure something out. The words stung more than she cared to admit. Marco had been her safety net from the beginning, but now, it felt like he was pushing her to fly without one. And for the first time, Ava realized that maybe she wasn't ready for that leap. Not yet. After hanging up, Ava sat down in one of the empty chairs in the cafe, her head spinning. She had worked so hard to get to this point, and yet, everything seemed precarious. The partnership with Lila, the crowdfunding, the renovations, everything hinged on success, and yet she could feel the ground slipping beneath her feet. But in the silence of the cafe, Ava realized something. Success wasn't just about avoiding failure. It was about learning how to balance it all. She couldn't control everything, but she could learn from every setback, every fear, and every doubt. And that, she realized, was the true test of her dream. The morning of the grand opening felt surreal to Ava. She stood in front of the cafe, her hands shaking slightly as she adjusted the grand opening sign on the window. The air was crisp and fresh, a perfect day for a new beginning, but inside, her heart was pounding like a drum. She had spent months preparing for this moment, but now that it was here, nothing felt certain. The cafe was ready, everything was in place. The walls were lined with artwork from local artists. The furniture was arranged just right, and the lighting was soft, creating a warm, welcoming atmosphere. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and Sweet Bloom's pastries filled the air. Ava had even put out a few extra tables outside to accommodate any customers who might be walking by. Jessica arrived early, as she had promised, ready to help with last-minute details. She rushed in through the door, her eyes bright with excitement. Ava, this looks amazing. I can't believe it's finally happening, Jessica exclaimed, taking in the space. I can't believe it either, Ava muttered, her nerves getting the better of her. Jessica raised an eyebrow. You okay? You don't seem like yourself. Ava sighed. running her hand through her hair. I don't know, Jess. I keep thinking something's going to go wrong. I've worked so hard for this, and now I just feel like it's all hanging by a thread. You've got this, Jessica said, giving her a reassuring pat on the back. Remember, it's all about building the community. Today is just the start. You've worked so hard to get to this point. Let's make it a success. Ava nodded, trying to push the doubt away. As the clock ticked down to opening time, the doors swung open, and the first customers of the day walked in. Hi, welcome, Ava greeted, trying to mask her nerves behind a smile. The group of friends, seemingly drawn in by the bright sign and the promise of something new, made their way to the counter. Ava's heart raced as she took their orders, remembering all the training she'd done to prepare for this moment. But when the first order came through, there was an unexpected hiccup. The espresso machine, which had been working perfectly during testing, suddenly sputtered and stopped. Ava froze, her stomach dropping. This was it, the moment she had feared. A technical issue on opening day. The customers were waiting, eyes expectant, and all she could think was that she was failing in front of them. Is everything okay? One of the customers asked, noticing the pause. Ava forced a smile. Yeah, just a little hiccup. We'll have that espresso for you in just a moment. Behind the counter, she scrambled to troubleshoot the machine, her hands trembling as she tried to figure out what went wrong. Jessica rushed over, seeing the panic in Ava's eyes. We've got this, Jessica said firmly. I'll handle the machine. You focus on the front. Ava nodded, her mind spinning. The last thing she wanted was for the customers to see her stress. She turned back to the counter and greeted the next set of customers, trying to keep her voice steady. But as the morning wore on, the tension didn't ease. There were more small setbacks, a delivery mix-up, the Wi-Fi going down briefly, a miscommunication with Lila about the pastry orders. But through it all, Ava kept her composure, one step at a time. Jessica worked tirelessly in the background, handling any issues that came up, while Ava focused on the customers, making sure they felt welcome and valued. By midday, the cafe had started to fill up. People lingered at tables, sipping coffee, chatting with friends, and enjoying the pastries. Ava could feel a small sense of relief begin to settle in. Despite the hiccups, the cafe was still running, and the customers seemed to appreciate the atmosphere and the food. It was when a familiar face walked through the door that Ava's nerves began to settle. Dwayne, she called out, surprised to see him there. Dwayne Johnson, who had become a friend and unofficial supporter of Ava's cafe, smiled widely as he approached. Hey, Ava. Just wanted to stop by and show some love on your opening day. Ava felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. Dwayne had been instrumental in spreading the word about her cafe, helping her build a local following. He had no idea how much his presence meant to her. Thanks so much for coming, Ava said, greeting him with a hug. It means the world to have you here. Dwayne gave her a reassuring look. You've got a great thing going here. You should be proud. For the next few hours, Ava did her best to keep up with the customers, but the energy in the cafe was undeniable. As more people came in, the cafe began to hum with life. The awkwardness and tension from earlier in the day started to fade away, replaced by a sense of accomplishment. But it wasn't until the evening, when the last customer had left and the cafe was nearly empty, that Ava felt the full weight of what she had achieved. The doors were locked, the lights dimmed, and the cafe was quiet once more. Ava sank into one of the chairs at a table near the window, her body exhausted but her heart full. Jessica joined her a few minutes later, a tired smile on her face. Well, we did it. Ava smiled back, the exhaustion catching up with her. Yeah, we did. Despite everything. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. I think you're being too hard on yourself, Jessica said, sitting down across from her. It was a success, and we're just getting started. Ava took a deep breath and looked around the cafe, imagining how much more it could grow. The cafe was just beginning to find its rhythm, and she knew that there would be challenges ahead. But now, she also knew that she could handle them. She had made it through the first day, with all its chaos and unexpected moments. And if she could make it through that, she could make it through anything. I'm proud of us, Ava said softly. Me too, Jessica replied, her voice filled with pride. As they sat in the quiet of the cafe, Ava realized that success wasn't defined by perfection. It wasn't about everything going smoothly or flawlessly. Success was about resilience. It was about showing up every day, facing whatever came her way, and still moving forward. That was the true spirit of her dream, and nothing could take that away. Ava had always imagined what her first week as a cafe owner would be like. The hustle, the rush of customers, the thrill of seeing her dream come to life. What she hadn't imagined was the exhaustion that followed the excitement. The long hours, the constant pressure, and the nagging worry that everything could fall apart at any moment. The first few days after the grand opening were a blur. The cafe was busier than she had expected, and while it was a good problem to have, it came with its own set of challenges. Ava was working around the clock, arriving before sunrise to prep the cafe, overseeing the orders, managing the social media accounts, and handling the inevitable issues that came with being a first-time business owner. But despite all the hustle, there was a strange sense of emptiness lingering at the back of her mind. Ava hadn't had a day off since the opening, and the weariness was starting to show. Her body ached, her eyes were tired, and her thoughts felt clouded. But she didn't have the luxury of slowing down. Not yet. That afternoon, she sat at the counter, catching a brief moment of respite as she sipped on her third cup of coffee for the day. She could hear the murmur of conversations around her and the clink of coffee cups, but the noise felt distant. She was lost in her own thoughts when the bell above the door jingled, signaling another customer. Ava looked up, her attention snapping back to the present as a familiar face entered the cafe. It was Dwayne again. He was dressed casually, his usual laid-back yet confident aura radiating as he walked in. "Hey there," he greeted, smiling warmly. "I thought I'd swing by again. See how you're holding up." Ava chuckled softly, the tension in her shoulders easing at the sight of him. "You're a sight for sore eyes. It's been a crazy few days. I didn't realize how much work went into running a cafe until I was actually doing it." Dwayne nodded, leaning against the counter. "I can imagine. It's a lot. But you're doing great. Your opening was amazing, and people are already talking about the place." Ava smiled faintly, grateful for his encouragement. "Thanks. It's just that. Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning. I didn't think it would be this hard. I thought the hard part was getting everything together. But now it feels like I'm barely keeping up." "I get it," Dwayne said, his voice serious now. "But you're doing this for a reason. You've got something special here, Ava. And I'm not just saying that because I'm your friend. People are coming here because they see what you're building. It's more than just coffee and pastries. It's about community, and people are connecting with that." Ava's gaze softened as she listened. The weight of his words was exactly what she needed to hear. She had been so focused on the little details, the things that weren't going perfectly, that she had lost sight of the bigger picture. "You're right," Ava said, her voice filled with a renewed sense of clarity. "I've been so wrapped up in trying to make everything perfect, but maybe it's okay if everything isn't. It's about creating a place where people feel like they belong." "That's exactly it," Dwayne agreed, his smile returning. "And people are already feeling that. You're doing great." Ava felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. It was easy to get lost in the hustle, to get caught up in the demands of running a business. But moments like these, conversations with people who believed in her and the vision for the cafe, reminded her why she had started this journey in the first place. Later that evening, as the cafe slowly emptied and the night settled in, Ava found herself reflecting on everything that had happened. The past few days had been overwhelming, but they had also shown her how strong and resilient she could be. She had faced obstacles she never could have anticipated, but she had kept moving forward. And that was something to be proud of. The next morning, as she walked into the cafe to open for the day, Ava was greeted by a surprise. An email from a local food critic asking if she could stop by to review the cafe. Ava's heart skipped a beat as she read through the message. This was the kind of opportunity she had been waiting for, but she hadn't expected it to come so soon. She quickly gathered her thoughts, her excitement bubbling to the surface. This was a turning point. A review from a respected critic could put her cafe on the map and bring in a whole new wave of customers. But it also meant more pressure, more responsibility. Ava looked around the cafe, feeling a sense of pride swelling inside her. This was her place, her creation, and no matter how hard it got, she knew she had made the right choice. The journey wasn't easy, and it wasn't always pretty, but she had made it this far. After dealing with the initial shock and excitement of the email, Ava made sure everything was in order for the critic's visit. She knew the pressure was on, but she also knew she was ready. The cafe had already survived its first week, and no matter what happened next, she would continue to push forward. As the critic arrived that afternoon, Ava's nerves returned in full force. But as she greeted the critic and showed her around the cafe, she reminded herself of something important. This wasn't just about impressing someone else. It was about staying true to her vision and letting the cafe speak for itself. By the time the critic left, Ava felt a sense of relief wash over her. She had done everything she could. Now, all she could do was wait for the review and see where it took her. Later that night, after the cafe had closed and the last customer had left, Ava sat in the quiet space, reflecting on the past week. It had been filled with challenges, but it had also been filled with moments of growth and triumph. And in those quiet moments, when she allowed herself to breathe, Ava realized that it wasn't just about surviving the hustle. It was about finding joy in the journey. No matter what happened next, Ava was ready for whatever came her way. She had learned to embrace the challenges, to take the good with the bad. The cafe was just beginning, and so was she. The morning after the food critic visited, Ava woke up with a mix of excitement and anxiety. Her eyes darted to her phone as soon as she opened them, checking for any sign of the review. Her heart raced. The cafe had already experienced so much in such a short time. Would this review be the breakthrough she needed, or would it shatter her confidence? She grabbed her phone and saw that the review had been published. Ava clicked on the link, her breath caught in her chest as she scrolled through the critic's words. Sweet Bloom's Cafe, located in the heart of town, offers a warm atmosphere and a carefully curated selection of locally sourced pastries and rich, aromatic coffees. Ava Carter, the owner, has clearly put her heart and soul into this endeavor, creating a space that's as much about community as it is about coffee. The pastries are delicate and beautifully crafted, though there are moments when they fall short of perfection. The cafe's true strength lies in its sense of belonging, its ability to make every guest feel like a part of something bigger. Ava felt a rush of relief, but then she read on. However, there are moments where the cafe's ambition outpaces its execution. The service can be inconsistent, and while the staff is friendly, there's an air of disorganization that detracts from the overall experience. Still, for a new business, Sweet Blooms shows promise. It's a place to watch. Ava set the phone down, her emotions mixed. On the one hand, the review praised the cafe's ambience and the sense of community she had worked so hard to build. But the criticism about the service and disorganization stung. The truth was, she knew there were areas that needed improvement, but hearing it from someone else felt like a punch to the gut. Just as she was about to close her eyes and let the emotions settle, the phone rang. It was Jessica. Ava, have you seen the review? Jessica's voice was upbeat, though Ava could sense the underlying concern. Yeah, I just read it, Ava replied, trying to keep her tone steady. It's good, I guess. Good, Jessica echoed, a laugh in her voice. Ava, it's better than good. The community is buzzing. People are already showing up to check it out. But I'm with you. I saw the part about the service and disorganization. We need to step it up. Ava ran her fingers through her hair, frustration beginning to bubble up. I know. I knew we weren't perfect, but hearing it like that makes it real. I want to be better. I don't want people to come in and feel like we're not delivering on what we promised. I get it, Jessica said. But you're right. There's always room for improvement. And you've already made such an impression. This review? It's going to push us even further. People are going to be curious now. We just need to be ready for them. Ava nodded, though she didn't feel as confident as Jessica did. The truth was, she was torn. She wanted to improve, of course, but how could she do that while also maintaining the spirit of the cafe? It had always been about building something authentic, not just a well-oiled machine. She had envisioned a place where people could feel comfortable, not just get coffee. When she arrived at the cafe later that morning, she found it more crowded than usual. There was a line at the counter, customers chatting eagerly about the review. Some looked around, excited to be there, while others had their phones out, reading more about the place. Ava's stomach tightened. "Welcome to Sweet Blooms," she said, greeting the new faces as warmly as she could. "What can I get you today?" She moved through the orders, trying to keep up with the crowd. But as the day wore on, she began to notice that some of the staff were struggling. There were delays with orders, confusion about who was handling what, and a sense of disorganization that mirrored the review. Ava had to step in more than once, trying to keep the operations running smoothly, but the chaos felt palpable. Lila, who had been doing her best to help, pulled Ava aside at one point. "Ava, I think we need to have a talk about our roles. We're getting a little too spread thin, and people are noticing. I'm not saying we're failing, but the rhythm we had before, it's off." Ava nodded, biting her lip. She knew it wasn't just about the critics' review. It was about how they were adapting to the increasing demand and how they were treating each customer. It was one thing to survive an opening day rush, but it was another to maintain quality service when the crowds kept coming. "I don't want this to turn into just a business," Ava said quietly. "I want it to be a place that means something to people. I don't want to lose that feeling just because we're getting more customers." "I get that," Lila said, her voice soft. "But we need to find a balance. We can still have that community vibe and be organized. If we don't, we're going to lose that feeling too. I don't want that to happen." The words hit Ava harder than she expected. She didn't want to be someone who let success slip away because of her own inexperience. She knew she needed to make changes, but part of her hesitated. Would tightening the reins ruin the very thing she had worked so hard to create? Later that day, the cafe wasn't just busy, it was chaotic. There were too many customers, and Ava found herself stretched thinner than ever. She tried to oversee everything, but in doing so, she found herself overlooking the small things that made Sweet Bloom special. The conversation she had had with Lila echoed in her mind. By the end of the day, Ava was physically drained. She sat down on one of the chairs by the window, watching the sunset. The cafe was still buzzing with activity, but she felt alone in her thoughts. She had made it through another day, but it was becoming clear. Something had to change. The next morning, Ava called a meeting with the staff. They sat around the table, a mix of anxiety and anticipation in the air. She could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on her, but she knew she needed to make decisions that would impact the future of the cafe. "I want to be clear," she began, her voice steady. "I'm not here to just run a business. I'm here to create something lasting, something meaningful. But we need to find a better balance. I'm willing to make changes to ensure we can do that." The staff nodded, ready to support her. The work ahead wouldn't be easy, but they were all in it together. And for the first time in a long while, Ava felt like she was on the right path again. One that wasn't just about surviving, but about thriving. The following weeks were a blur of progress and setbacks. After the food critics' review, Sweet Bloom's cafe was busier than ever. Customers poured in, eager to see what the buzz was all about. Ava was both excited and overwhelmed by the surge in business. It was everything she had dreamed of, but now, the reality of running the cafe was hitting her hard. She had spent days trying to balance the flow of customers, the quality of the coffee, and the relationships with her staff. She had meetings with Jessica and Lila, discussing how they could improve the cafe's service and organization. They brainstormed new strategies for managing the rush, from reorganizing the kitchen workflow to adding more staff during peak hours. Ava knew changes were necessary, but every adjustment felt like a compromise between her vision and the reality of running a business. Despite her best efforts, things didn't always go smoothly. There were days when the line of customers snaked out the door, and Ava found herself unable to keep up with the chaos. One morning, a delivery arrived late, throwing off the entire cafe schedule. The customers who were waiting for their coffee weren't shy about expressing their displeasure. Ava could feel the tension rising in the air as she apologized repeatedly, trying to smooth things over while mentally scrambling to find a solution. It wasn't just the cafe's operation that was causing stress. Her personal life was starting to feel the weight of the changes as well. Dwayne, who had once been a steady support, was now a reminder of everything that had changed. The cafe had become Ava's priority, her dream, and it was beginning to consume her every waking moment. Even when she wasn't at the cafe, she was thinking about it. The long hours, the pressure to succeed, and the fear of failure clouded her mind, leaving little room for anything else. Dwayne had been understanding at first, but as the weeks passed, Ava could sense the growing distance between them. He would pop into the cafe from time to time, offering his usual encouragement and warmth, but there was a quiet tension in the air whenever they spoke. Ava couldn't help but notice the way his gaze lingered on her, a mixture of concern and something deeper she couldn't quite decipher. She wasn't sure what to make of it, but she couldn't afford to dwell on it. She had too much on her plate. One evening, after another long day of managing orders and ensuring everything ran smoothly, Ava found herself closing up the cafe alone. The staff had gone home, and the last customer had just left. The silence of the cafe felt both peaceful and unsettling. She was exhausted, her body aching from the constant motion. As she wiped down the counter, she heard the soft chime of the doorbell. She looked up, and there he was, Dwayne, standing in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the dim light of the street lamp outside. "Hey," he said quietly, his voice gentle. "I thought I'd stop by and check on you." Ava smiled faintly, her heart skipping a beat despite her weariness. "You always know when to show up," she said with a light laugh, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. Dwayne stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I'm starting to think I should just camp out here and wait for you to come back to life," he said with a teasing grin. But his smile faded as he took in her tired expression. "You're burning the candle at both ends, Ava. You need a break." Ava leaned against the counter, exhaling slowly. "I know. I can't afford to stop. There's so much to do, and I feel like if I take a step back, everything will fall apart." "Nothing's going to fall apart," Dwayne said, his voice steady and reassuring. He stepped closer to her, his eyes searching hers. "But you're only human. You can't keep running on empty. The cafe needs you to be at your best, but so do you." Ava shook her head, her shoulders slumping. "I don't know if I can do this, Dwayne. I'm afraid that if I let go, if I slow down even a little, it'll all unravel." He reached out, gently cupping her chin, lifting her gaze to meet his. "I get it. I really do. But you don't have to do it all alone. You've built something incredible here, but it's okay to ask for help. You don't have to be everything to everyone." Ava's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to lean into him, to let the weight of her exhaustion fade away, but there was a part of her that pulled back. She wasn't sure if it was because she was afraid of what he might want from her, or if it was because she was scared of what would happen if she let someone in too much. "I don't want to disappoint anyone," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. Dwayne's expression softened. "You won't. But you need to take care of yourself first. You can't pour from an empty cup, Ava." Ava stood in silence for a moment, his words sinking deep into her. She had always believed that hard work and dedication were the keys to success. But as she looked at Dwayne, his steady presence, his genuine care for her, she realized something important. Success wasn't just about working harder. It was about finding balance, about knowing when to push and when to step back. The next morning, after a restless night of thinking about what Dwayne had said, Ava made a decision. She called Jessica and Lila into the cafe for a staff meeting. It was time to make some changes. "I've been running myself into the ground," she said, her voice steady but filled with vulnerability. "And it's not just about the cafe. I need to find a better balance between work and everything else. I can't keep doing this alone." Jessica nodded, understanding in her eyes. "We've got you, Ava. Let's figure out a plan to make things more manageable." Lila added, "We're a team. We'll make sure the cafe keeps running smoothly without you having to do everything." Ava felt a weight lift off her shoulders. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to breathe. She didn't have to be perfect. She didn't have to do everything by herself. And that was okay. The weeks following Ava's decision to embrace balance had been a whirlwind of adjustments. She had taken Dwayne's advice to heart, and though it wasn't easy, she began to delegate more responsibilities to her team. Jessica and Lila had stepped up in ways Ava hadn't expected, handling customer service with a calm professionalism that helped ease the pressure on Ava. The cafe's operations began to flow more smoothly, But there was one aspect that continued to pull at her: the kitchen. The cafe was growing. More customers meant longer lines, faster service, and higher expectations. While Ava had always been hands-on in the kitchen, experimenting with recipes and overseeing the preparation of every dish, she realized she couldn't continue to manage it all herself. She needed someone more experienced to take over the kitchen operations and guide the team. But the thought of letting go was harder than she had anticipated. The morning after another long shift, Ava sat in the cafe's small office, reviewing the budget and planning the next steps for expansion. Her mind kept returning to the kitchen. She needed a head chef, someone who could take Sweet Blooms to the next level without losing the authenticity that made the cafe special. But was she ready to trust someone else with her dream? As she stared at the empty cup of coffee in front of her, a knock on the office door pulled her from her thoughts. It was Jessica. "You look like you've been staring at that cup for an hour," Jessica said with a smile, her tone light but knowing. "What's on your mind?" Ava sighed, pushing the cup aside. "I'm thinking about the kitchen. I know I can't keep doing it all myself, but the thought of bringing in someone new, I'm just not sure. It feels like I'd be giving up too much control." Jessica pulled up a chair, sitting down across from her. "Ava, you've built something amazing here. You can't keep running yourself ragged. A head chef could take things off your plate and help you focus on growing the business. And you know what? They'll bring in new ideas. You've always been great at creating a welcoming space, but you don't have to be the one in the kitchen all the time." "I know," Ava said quietly, "but it's hard to trust someone else with that. I've always been the one to put my heart into every dish, to make sure everything's just right." "I get that," Jessica said, her voice soft but firm, "but you can't keep doing everything. And if you find the right person, they'll take your vision and run with it. They won't take away from what you've built, they'll add to it." Ava leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes for a moment. The decision weighed heavily on her. She had built Sweet Blooms from the ground up, pouring every ounce of herself into it. Could she really let someone else take the reins of the kitchen? Would they understand her passion for quality, for authenticity? As she opened her eyes, she knew the answer. If she wanted the cafe to thrive, she had to trust the people around her. It was time to find that person, to bring in a head chef who could help her grow the business without compromising the heart of Sweet Blooms. "I'll start the search," Ava said, her voice resolute, "but it's going to be hard." "I know it will be," Jessica replied with a reassuring smile. "But you've got this. You've built something incredible, and now it's time to share that with the world." Over the next few days, Ava began to research potential candidates for the head chef position. She interviewed a number of chefs with impressive resumes, but none seemed to be the right fit. They all had the technical skills, but they didn't seem to understand the spirit of Sweet Blooms, the warm, community-driven atmosphere that made it special. Then, one evening, as she was about to close the cafe for the night, a woman walked in, carrying a portfolio under her arm. She looked familiar, and as she approached the counter, Ava realized it was Marissa, a former culinary school classmate. "Ava, it's been a while," Marissa said, offering a warm smile. "I heard about Sweet Blooms, and I thought I'd stop by. I've been working in a few places, but I've been looking for something different, something more community-focused. I heard you might be looking for a head chef." Ava stared at her for a moment, taking in the confidence in Marissa's eyes. She'd always admired Marissa's skills back in school. She was smart, creative, and a natural leader in the kitchen. But could she really be the right fit for the cafe? "I am looking for someone," Ava said slowly, her mind racing. "But I'm not sure if. I don't want to lose the vibe we've created here." Marissa nodded understandingly. "I get it. I wouldn't want to change the heart of what you've built, but I think I can help bring it to the next level. I've worked in fine dining, but I've always wanted to be part of something more personal, something that's about more than just food. I think Sweet Blooms is that place." Ava took a deep breath. This felt like the moment she had been waiting for. The right person was standing in front of her. "I'll tell you what," Ava said, a smile tugging at her lips. "Why don't you come in tomorrow and see how we run things? You can meet the team, and we'll see if it's a good fit." "I'd love that," Marissa said, her excitement evident. "I'll be there." The next day, Marissa arrived early, ready to step into the kitchen and get to work. As the morning rush began, Ava watched as Marissa took charge in the kitchen, effortlessly coordinating with the team and keeping everything running smoothly. There was a calmness about her that Ava hadn't expected, but it was exactly what the cafe needed. It was clear that Marissa had the skills, the experience, and the passion to elevate Sweet Blooms without sacrificing its heart. By the end of the day, Ava knew she had found the right person. It had been a few months since Marissa took over the kitchen at Sweet Blooms, and the changes were undeniable. The cafe had grown in ways Ava never imagined. The lines were longer, the menu had expanded, and the community of regulars felt like a tight-knit family. Sweet Blooms had become more than just a cafe. It had become a gathering place, a hub for people to come together over great coffee and delicious food. It was everything Ava had dreamed of, and more. In the kitchen, Marissa had transformed the menu, introducing new dishes that complemented the cafe's original offerings while maintaining the integrity of the vision Ava had started with. The team worked seamlessly together, each person playing an integral role in making Sweet Blooms the success it had become. Ava no longer felt like she was drowning in the day-to-day operations. She could step back and focus on the bigger picture, and it was a relief. But the real change wasn't just in the cafe, it was in Ava herself. She had learned to trust others, to let go of the need for complete control, and to accept that she didn't have to carry the weight of the business alone. It was a humbling lesson, one that had been difficult to accept but ultimately necessary. And as she stood behind the counter, watching the cafe come to life with customers laughing, chatting, and enjoying their meals, she couldn't help but smile. "Your cafe's really thriving," Dwayne said, walking up beside her. He had been a steady presence in her life, supporting her every step of the way. Over time, their relationship had shifted into something deeper. He was no longer just the man who had helped her pick up the pieces. He had become her partner in every sense of the word. Ava turned to him, her heart swelling. "I couldn't have done it without you." He raised an eyebrow, a playful smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Oh, come on. I was just the backup. You're the one who built this." Ava laughed softly, shaking her head. "I'm not sure I would have been able to keep going without you. You were there when I needed someone to remind me to take care of myself. You helped me find balance when I was losing myself in the chaos." Dwayne reached for her hand, his touch warm and steady. "You found your own balance, Ava. I just reminded you that you were worth it. You didn't need to do everything yourself." Her eyes softened as she gazed at him, feeling a quiet sense of peace settle within her. They had both changed over the months. They had grown together, and there was no more uncertainty between them. Ava knew now that she didn't have to choose between her career and her personal life. She could have both. She could pursue her dreams and still have the support of the people who cared about her. As they stood there, watching the cafe buzz with life, Ava realized that the true success wasn't just in the business. It was in the relationships she had built. She had created something that brought people together, and she had built a life that was full of love, support, and hope. The door to the cafe opened, and a new group of customers walked in, their laughter filling the space. Ava took a deep breath, feeling a sense of gratitude wash over her. This was what she had worked for. This was the dream she had fought so hard to build, and it was only just beginning. She turned to Dwayne, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Ready to make a fresh pot of coffee?" she asked, her voice full of affection. He grinned, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "You bet. Let's make it the best one yet." As they walked to the back of the cafe together, Ava couldn't help but feel a deep sense of contentment. She had come so far, and yet, she knew the journey was far from over. There would always be challenges, always be new obstacles to face. But she had learned that with the right people by her side, there was no limit to what they could accomplish. Ava had built more than just a cafe. She had built a life full of love, purpose, and possibility. And for the first time in a long while, she felt truly at home. Ava sat at the corner booth of Sweet Blooms, looking out the window at the quiet street. It was early morning, and the cafe was just beginning to wake up, the smell of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. Despite the success of the past few months, Ava felt a sense of restlessness, a nagging feeling that there was something more out there waiting for her. The cafe was thriving. Marissa had truly taken the kitchen to new heights, and the team was working in harmony. each person contributing to the cafe's success in their own way. Dwayne had become a regular presence in her life, and their relationship had deepened. He had proven to be more than just a support system. He had become her partner in every sense of the word. But despite all of this, Ava couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing on the edge of something bigger. There were new opportunities beginning to present themselves, opportunities that could take Sweet Blooms to new heights. But with that growth came a new set of challenges, challenges that Ava wasn't sure she was ready for. The cafe had outgrown its space. The lines were longer, the demand for catering had increased, and Ava was receiving requests to open new locations. People loved what Sweet Blooms stood for: the cozy atmosphere, the community spirit, and the delicious food. But could she replicate that success in a new space? Could she manage multiple locations without losing the soul of the business? Ava's mind was racing, thinking of all the possibilities and the risks that came with them. Her phone buzzed on the table, breaking her thoughts. She glanced down at the screen. It was a message from Dwayne. "Hey, we need to talk. Are you free this afternoon?" Ava felt a wave of uncertainty wash over her. It wasn't unusual for Dwayne to want to talk, but the tone of the message made her wonder what was going on. She quickly typed a response. "Of course. I'll be free after 2. Let's grab some lunch." As she sent the message, a part of her felt a bit anxious. She and Dwayne had been in sync lately, but there was always the undercurrent of uncertainty, especially with her busy schedule and the growing pressures of running Sweet Blooms. She couldn't help but wonder if the conversation would be about them, about their future. The morning passed quickly, and by the time Ava closed the cafe for the afternoon, she was already feeling the weight of the conversation that was about to unfold. She grabbed her things and headed out the door, locking it behind her before heading to the restaurant where she had planned to meet Dwayne. The small bistro was quiet, a few patrons sipping coffee at the counter. Dwayne was already there, sitting at a table by the window. His smile greeted her as she approached, but his eyes were serious. "You okay?" Ava asked, settling into the chair across from him. Dwayne nodded, though his brow was furrowed. "Yeah, I'm good. I've been thinking about something." Ava took a deep breath, sensing the weight of his words. "What's going on?" "I've been hearing a lot about Sweet Blooms lately," Dwayne said, his voice thoughtful. "People love it. They want more. I've seen you stressing over how to keep up with everything. I know you've been thinking about expanding, but I think you're burning yourself out trying to do it all yourself." Ava swallowed, her thoughts racing. "I know I've been juggling a lot, but I don't want to let go of the things that made Sweet Blooms special. I can't just focus on the bottom line. It has to be more than that." "I get it," Dwayne said, his gaze softening. "You've built something incredible, but I think you're at a crossroads. You have to decide what the next step is for you, for the cafe." Ava's heart pounded in her chest. The weight of his words settled heavily on her shoulders. Could she really take that next step? Could she expand Sweet Blooms without losing the sense of community that had been its heart? "I'm scared, Dwayne," Ava admitted, her voice quiet. "What if expanding changes everything? What if I lose what makes this place special?" Dwayne reached across the table, his hand gently covering hers. "You won't lose it. You've built something that people love because it's real, because it's you. And you're not alone in this anymore. You've got a great team. You've got me. And you've got yourself. You've always been strong, Ava. Don't let fear hold you back from what you've worked so hard for." Ava took a deep breath, her chest tightening. Dwayne's words brought comfort, but they also brought clarity. The road ahead would be hard. Expanding meant change, meant taking risks, and meant stepping into a new role she wasn't entirely sure she was ready for. But perhaps that was the only way forward. "Maybe you're right," she said slowly. "Maybe it's time to take the leap." Dwayne smiled, his eyes filled with pride. "Whatever you decide, I'm here for you. You don't have to do this alone." Ava felt a weight lift off her shoulders, and for the first time in a long while, she felt like she could breathe. She wasn't alone in this. And maybe, just maybe, that was the key to her next step. As they finished their meal, Ava's mind was already working through the possibilities. The future was still uncertain, but she knew one thing for sure. Sweet Blooms had come so far because of the people who believed in it. And now, with Dwayne by her side, She had the strength to face whatever came next. The next phase of the journey was just beginning. The following weeks felt like a blur for Ava. The weight of her decision to expand Sweet Blooms settled heavily on her shoulders, but the sense of anticipation was palpable. She had made the choice, and now it was time to put her plans into action. She wasn't just expanding a business, she was expanding a dream. A dream that had started with just a few recipes and a tiny cafe, and now it was on the verge of becoming something much bigger. Ava had reached out to her most trusted team members, including Marissa, to discuss the logistics of opening a second location. They met every day to brainstorm ideas, run through financial projections, and scout potential new locations. Marissa, always the optimist, had already begun experimenting with new menu items for the expansion, while Ava focused on finding the perfect space. They were a team, and it was more apparent than ever. Still, Ava couldn't help but feel a wave of doubt as she walked through the potential spaces. Each one had its pros and cons, but none of them felt quite right. She was looking for something special, something that could capture the essence of Sweet Blooms and make it feel just as cozy, welcoming, and personal as the original. It had to have that same magic. Any luck? Dwayne's voice cut through her thoughts as he entered the cafe one afternoon, his presence always managing to put her at ease. Ava sighed, rubbing her temples. Not yet. I've seen some good places, but none of them feel right. I don't know. I think I'm overthinking it. Dwayne smiled knowingly. You're not overthinking. You're just being thorough. It's a big decision. She nodded, her mind racing. I know. It's just, what if I mess this up? What if I lose what we've built? He stepped closer, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. You won't mess it up. You've come this far because of who you are. You built Sweet Blooms with your heart, and that's something that can't be duplicated by a new location. Just remember that it's not about finding the perfect space. It's about carrying the heart of Sweet Blooms with you wherever you go. Ava looked up at him, feeling the reassurance in his words. It wasn't about the building. It was about the people, the atmosphere, and the connection. If she could recreate that spirit, then the new location would be just as successful as the original. That night, Ava lay awake in bed, the weight of the decision pressing on her chest. She thought about all the people who had supported Sweet Blooms from the very beginning. Her team, her friends, and even the customers who had become like family. They were all part of this journey, and she couldn't lose sight of that. The next morning, Ava decided to take a different approach. Instead of searching for the perfect space, she would let the space find her. She spent the day walking through different neighborhoods, talking to locals, and listening to what people wanted. She visited other cafes, noting what worked and what didn't. By the end of the day, she found herself in a neighborhood she hadn't considered before. One that was up and coming, but still filled with potential. It was gritty, vibrant, and full of character. Ava stood on the sidewalk, looking up at a space that had once been a small bookstore. The windows were dusty, the doors locked, but something about it felt right. She could see it. The cafe, the community, the spirit of Sweet Blooms. It wasn't perfect yet, but she could make it perfect. She smiled, feeling a sense of clarity wash over her. This was it. This was the place that would help Sweet Blooms grow without losing its soul. As she stood there, taking it all in, Dwayne called her. She picked up the phone, her voice light with excitement. You're never going to believe it. What happened? Dwayne asked. I think I found the spot, Ava said, her voice bubbling with energy. It's not perfect, but it's got potential. It's in a great location, and I can see it turning into something amazing. Dwayne laughed softly. I knew you'd find it. When do we sign the lease? Ava grinned. Soon. I'm going to make this work. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity as Ava, Dwayne, and her team worked tirelessly to transform the new space into the next chapter of Sweet Blooms. The renovation was challenging, with delays and unexpected costs, but Ava's resolve never wavered. She knew this was the right step, and with each brick laid, each new coat of paint, the vision began to take shape. On opening day, the new cafe was nothing short of spectacular. It was everything Ava had imagined and more. The cozy vibe of the original Sweet Blooms was alive and well, but with a fresh, modern twist. The community came out in droves to show their support, and the place was packed from the moment the doors opened. As Ava stood behind the counter, looking out at the bustling cafe, she felt a deep sense of pride. She had done it. Sweet Blooms had expanded, and it was everything she had hoped for, and more. Dwayne walked over, his arms wide open. "You did it," he said, his voice full of admiration. Ava smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "We did it." And for the first time in a long time, Ava realized that her dream wasn't just about building a successful cafe. It was about building a community, about creating something that brought people together, about giving them a place to feel at home. The road ahead was still long, filled with challenges and obstacles, but Ava knew she had everything she needed to face them. With Dwayne by her side, her team behind her, and her community supporting her, there was no limit to what Sweet Blooms could become. This was just the beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?